Chapter 141, Hunt. This is X, he said over the radio, reconnecting with the mobile base's cameras. I have a lead on dial, but I require help from a human. In the base, several people looked at each other before one man, the bridge soldier in command of the unit on the Savage Land, came up to the mic. We read you, X. We have an asset in the field heading out to you. He said he should be able to find you soon. X acknowledged that. Very well. I'll track their armor and contact them through it. The bridge soldier hesitated. That won't really work. Why not? He doesn't have armor. The only thing he went out with was a knife. Sergei Kravinov/Craven the Hunter. Craven shook his head as he ran through the jungle. He'd had a fun day so far. Met up with some old smuggler friends willing to ship him to Antarctica. Always good to start a hunt off meeting old friends. His friends, French pilots who had some familiarity with flying into the ice-cold regions of the world, had been doing well. He'd then airdropped over the cold of the most remote region of Earth with nothing but a parachute and a beam emitter that Boris had given him, really a laser that had been modified per bridge specifications to emit the light they'd discovered could open the veil around the Savage Land. That had been a thrill. Falling towards a world of ice, feeling the chill wind pass him by. Then, a single laser flying out of the boxy device he'd lugged along, and he was headed down for a jungle instead. What an incredible thing to see! From there, things had been much more familiar. Note. He parachuted into the jungle and made his way to the bridge mobile command center. When he got there, the bridge soldiers immediately pulled him in. Where is Phantasma? Craven had asked curiously. She and Creel are knocked out, the bridge man in command had told him. They've been up since Dial disappeared. We're letting them rest until we get news. Good. Sleep was as necessary to survival as sustenance and shelter. While Craven had long since trained himself to only require 30 minutes of sleep 4 times a day, he still needed that rest. Lack of sleep could kill a man as effectively as any animal, and in many cases lead to dying by animal anyways. Craven rubbed his chin. Then I will head out for the hunt. You mean rescue, the bridge soldier said hesitantly. Is there a difference? Craven scoffed. Honestly. As though he hadn't saved tourists from their own stupidity before. Where was our shape-shifting friend last seen? Here, a scientist said nearby, pointing at a map. Craven studied it for a moment before nodding. Very well, I am off. Alone, the soldier asked. If I want to go quickly, yes, Craven said with a scoff. Honestly. While these men may have some skill on the battlefield, especially if they had even the slightest amount of skill the lovely Melissa May had displayed, they were not hunters. Well, we currently have an asset in the field tracking dial right now, the soldier said. X, an android. He said he had a lead. An android? In the jungle? The soldier shivered at the interested smile Craven displayed. Do you need anything before you go? The soldier asked. We have more armor, weapons dash. Craven shook his head, patting his sides, where a steel and bone knife hung on each hip. I will be fine as is. Then he turned and left, ignoring the stuttering of the soldier as he left. From there, the hunt began. And it was an interesting one. First, he went to the cliff where Dial had fallen, and leaped off of it, hopping his way down the rocks with incredible agility until he had gotten to the bottom. Then he leaped into one of the trees along the river and made his way along the shore, jumping from tree to tree with practiced ease. The Savage Land was a delight to the senses. The sense of animals he'd never encountered, plants larger than he could have ever believed, even the insects here were enormous and powerful creatures, if the dragonflies that frequented the river were any indication. Craven reveled in how hostile this place was. After half a lifetime of hunting, he'd nearly memorized almost every jungle on Earth. Not entirely, of course, the very nature of jungles made such things impossible, but he'd gained a sense for how they worked. He'd hunted every manner of animal, survived floods, forest fires, and hurricanes, turning predators into prey. Over time, Craven had only gotten stronger and more skilled. He'd taken the wild and made it a home. Not the Savage Land. Here, the trees stretched upwards for hundreds of feet, a city of green to rival the likes of New York. The brush was thick enough to entangle the largest of animals, and the scent of the jungle was almost aggressive. Every time he jumped from tree to tree, using the tall foliage the way lesser men would use trails, the land spoke to him. You are not welcome. You are prey. Make one mistake and you will die. I care not for the great empires of man, for I have survived while they have risen and fallen. How enticing. To be once more a novice. He hadn't felt such a thrill since he'd been a young man in Kenya. For all his experience, he couldn't help the feeling within him. The thirst to prove oneself that only the greatest of men felt deep in their hearts. Either that or he was having his first midlife crisis. His amusement at the internal thought faded when he noticed an irregularity. A crater alongside the river, on the opposite bank. In a twisting movement that would have left the most avid Olympic gymnasts gasping in awe, Craven leaped out and grabbed a branch in his hands, the bark under his palms cool as he twirled around it 3 times before releasing it to fly across the river in a somersault. He landed in a roll on the other side and came to an instant stop next to the crater. Then he took a long hard look at it. Newly formed, he mused to himself. Dust from the crater had flown up to land on nearby plants, proving that true. It was about 3 feet deep, but nothing stood in its center. He took a deep sniff. The scent of metal, ozone, and silicone filled his lungs. The android. He looked around and found the tracks. The android had a heavy gait, but the ground was dry enough that it took a small amount of effort to discover where he had gone. He'd entered the river for a brief moment, then left it to begin trekking alongside the river. So the android was on the trail as well. Craven leaped into the trees again, moving rapidly to follow. If the android found Dial before him, Craven would never live it down. It was during this next leg of the hunt that he discovered something interesting. The android was among the easiest things to follow he'd ever encountered. The android had apparently taken the same method tanks did when it came to tracking prey. Simply stride forward and bulldoze anything that blocked you. Craven found ancient trees ripped out of the earth and discarded on their sides as though the thousands of tons of wood were little more than driftwood. He'd also sliced his way through the brush with brutal efficiency, leaving long trailing gaps of devastated foliage and large footprints. Craven noted a few boulders that had been ripped out of the ground as well. Apparently, whenever the android came up against anything it was faster to tear through rather than walk around. He simply ripped through it. It was almost impressive. Soon, Craven found himself dropping from the trees to land in a small field. He looked around, face neutral as he took in the scents and sounds of the area. X had been here, the footprints said. But so had 2 others. Craven leaned down to look at some grass that had been torn in half, as though by a hand. Then at some small footprints like those of a baby elephant in terms of the way the weight was being distributed. Of course, then there were the massive footprints that must have come from a being that outweighed elephants by several tons. Craven eyed the footprints, including the ones that showed the largest animal had been running towards the android. Craven laughed when he realized what had happened. Impressive. This android must have been quite strong. Then, the android entered the water, and never came back up. He eyed the water. After a moment, Craven dived in, disappearing beneath the waves. Some close examination revealed the existence of the tunnel. Any normal man wouldn't have gone in without some form of oxygen tank. Craven had no such fears. He'd hunted in caves and deep beneath the ocean, lakes, and rivers of various parts of the world on many an occasion. The world's longest recorded dives often lasted over 10 minutes, with the divers requiring time hyperventilating oxygen beforehand in order to last that long. Craven had no need for such things. He took the only piece of technology he had brought with him, a small flashlight, and placed it between his lips before entering the tunnel. The hunter crawled in the hole for long minutes, fingers pressing to stones, the cold water pressing in around him. The conditions were less claustrophobic than he expected. He soon discovered why when he realized that the tunnel had been pushed to be wider than it had been, with scratches along the walls and some portions opened up so wide that Craven managed to grab some air. He rose out of the end of the tunnel and blinked up at what he had found. "Good afternoon," the android said. The large being in front of him had eyes that emitted a powerful beam of light, illuminating the cave around them. Craven pulled himself out of the tunnel as the android stepped forward. "I am X." Craven stood to his full height and faced the being warily. He was built thick and strong in size, his body made of smooth metal all across. Craven noted the machete, revolver, and rifle the AI was wearing. Apparently he'd come prepared for a fight. "Interesting. I am Craven." "Yes, I know," X said quickly. "I have been stymied in my search." Abrupt. "Wonderful?" He had no wish to waste time with pleasantries. "What happened?" Craven asked. "Antimetal, a substance so named by Dial for its ability to dissolve the bonds of atoms in metal," X said. "Of course, that is a rather brisk description of the material, but it will suffice until it can be studied." Craven eyed one of the android's hands, which had been partially melted. "My, that was an interesting material. I suppose that would be an issue for a man like you." X nodded. "I require organic assistance." "You have it, my friend," Craven laughed, walking forward. "Come, let's continue the hunt." Chapter 142, Gladiator Eye, Devil. That had to be Devil Dinosaur. I was in the cages with Gresh, Demi, Wing Girl, and German Jerk. It was the middle of the night now. I'd slept for a good long while after filling my belly with whatever that meat-filled bread was and a lot of water that was kinda gross. I had woken up early, lying on the cold hard dirt. My right arm was feeling much better, oddly. The wonders of rest. I was still hurting, but my headache was gone. I sat up against the cage bars and looked around. Demi the rock person was standing in the center of the room. I kept still other than my head. I'd been doing this consistently. Since we had entered the city, I'd compiled every bit of information I could get, creating a mental picture of the world around us. My escape plan was simple. Anyone with even the slightest bit of knowledge on tactics knows the best plans are simple. It's kind of like in a fight. You can build a crazy contraption that magically breaks someone's nose, or punch someone in the face as hard as possible. You get style points for one, but the other is not only easy but also has a good record for working. The plan was first, survive the next day and figure out my weapons. In this case, the weapons I had available were simple. My brain, my allies, and time. I'd taken a good look at the locks on these cages. They were primitive things, made of crude iron. Any lockpicker worth a damn could open them. I was worth a damn. I could open them as long as I had the right tools. Then there were the guards. 2 guards, rotating shifts. I'd have to take them out of the proceedings. Once they were out of the way, I'd release the prisoners. With enough people, we could charge our way out. But that wasn't the real goal. The real goal was to get to Bridge. Just one Quinjet and a small squad with Katam armor and weapons would help me take these guys apart, not to mention any Avengers helping. But that was the plan. Unlock cage, take out guards, escape, get help. Simple, and subject to change. It had to be flexible, to be able to shift as new information and obstacles appeared. As I was thinking this, 3 people entered the room. Both guards turned to face her. A human woman, maybe a little younger than me, came up with 2 Anklio lords. She looked Caucasian, with a tan. She surprised me by speaking the language of the Sorlords to the guards, who moved to let her pass. She surprised me more when she walked up to my cage. She eyed everyone in the cage for a moment before facing me. She was tall and muscular, with long pale brown hair and tanned skin. She had some scars around her wrists, and her eyes were brown. She met my eyes. "Lord Stand wants you," she said in English. She sounded British. "I'm currently dating someone," I said back, smirking at her. "And no offense to Stand, but he's got stiff competition. Plus, she'll kill him." I wondered what Jen was doing now. She should have been on a mission by now. "Lord Stand has offered to heal your wounds," the woman said in a monotone voice, "if you will answer his questions." He's inviting me out on a date." I rose to my feet, ignoring the pain that followed any kind of movement. I was still covered in bruises. "That's adorable. Well, let's go. I'll let the big lug down easy." The woman frowned at me. I grinned. I might be spending too much time with Tony and Nat if I was being this sarcastic. "Well, I'm down." I took a hold of the cage bars and grinned at her. "So, take me to your leader." I sat as calmly as I could while the cuts on my body were cleaned by the woman. She'd brought me to a small room higher up the building we were in. I don't think she or the 2 Sorlords with us noticed me carefully tracking my way through the building, noting the area around us through the windows, marking directions. The room she'd brought me to was clean, well lit by torches, and had a large table in the center and some drawers made of wood. I'd been guided to sit on the table, after which the woman got to work. She cleaned out the 2 cuts I'd gotten from the raptors. The one on my hip was especially deep, and it stung as she used water to wipe it out before pouring something that smelled a lot like alcohol into the wound, pinprick stings following every motion. Once clean, she packed in some goopy green substance into the wound before wrapping it in a bandage. Then she removed the makeshift wraps around my broken arm. It looked red and slightly swollen, but not bad. She rewrapped it with expert precision, then put my arm into a leather sling. I was starting to look pretty primitive when you took the leather sling in along with the rest of my clothes. My jeans and shirt were replaced by a leather vest and loincloth. Yeah, a loincloth. I knew the savage land would get me into one sooner or later. Thank God I'd worked out for months so I looked more like Tarzan and less like, I don't know, some fat caveman. As soon as the woman was done, she stepped back from me. "You are healing well, Lord Stand. He is ready." "Good." Stand stepped into the room. He'd been waiting for his moment. The Stegolord walked up to me. My sword was still bouncing at his hip. He came to a stop in front of me and smirked. "Leave. Now." "Yes, my lord." The woman bowed and turned to leave. "Hey," I said. She stopped to look at me. "What's your name?" She stared at me. I think she was thinking about answering. Right up until Stand turned and grabbed her by the throat, lifting her in a smooth motion. He grinned up at her as he squeezed on her throat. "Oi." I stepped forward, shocked. One of the guards snapped forward to bring his spear close to my chest, stopping me in my tracks. "Her name," Stand said smugly, "is Slave, isn't it?" The girl was choking, clutching desperately at Stand. She nodded quickly, tears in her eyes. Then, "Slave. Follow my last order. Leave." Stand spun around and tossed her out the door. She let out a pained gasp as she hit the floor. She didn't say a word though. She just rose up as fast as possible and rushed away. Stand turned towards me with a chuckle. "Now, you. I have questions." "What? You want me to teach you my advanced wedge technique?" I snarled. "Because I'm pretty sure Biff Tannen and Draco Malfoy would be proud of that little stunt." Pathetic. That's what it was. This roided up Dino was throwing his weight around at people who couldn't fight back. At that woman. At me. He was a bully. And the worst part of that was that I didn't have a way to fight back. I kept myself as calm as I could while staring at him, keeping a neutral expression on my face. "Don't show your feelings." Sarcasm and calm were my allies in this fight of wills. "Oh." Stand smiled viciously. "No love for a fellow human. I never fall in love on the first date." I shrugged. "What do you want, Stand?" "Answers, my dear outsider." "Answers." He walked out. The guard poked at me, forcing me to follow. Stand strode through the halls with the calm demeanor of king in his castle. "Our civilization is young. Only 20 years old. I remember the old days, when we were but savages, running through the jungles like the others. But then, our Lord came. He taught us about forging steel, building the great structures around us. He taught us many things." Sten's hands clenched into fists. "And yet, he never spoke of where such things came from. The source of his knowledge. And as we captured slaves, 2 groups stood out to me. The New Britannians and the New Deutschlanders. Descendants of outsiders like you. Men who were at war landed on our shores and made a home here while continuing their war. They told stories to their descendants. And I listened to those stories. Stories of cities and civilizations far beyond ours. Of wars between vast armies, with medicine, culture, and people far advanced from our own. 20 years of progress. And we were still primitive buffoons." We entered an office. I was beginning to get a sense for who Stand was, so I wasn't surprised to see that his office was ceiling to floor with books. Among them was a map, resting on a nearby wall. A map of the Earth, next to one of Antarctica. Except that the map of Earth was very rough, printed onto thick parchment, while the one of Antarctica was full of green and blue. Didn't need to be a genius to know the map was depicting the savage land. It was far cleaner and more detailed than the other one was. I have some theories. Sten strode around his desk to sit at a roughly hewn chair that was built with a long divide in the center so his stegosaur fins and tail would pop out the back. Our Lord has been good to us. Or so I believed. But recently, I have begun to question just how good he truly is. Sten pulled out a journal. He taught us the secrets of medicine, but then I enslaved a Britannian who taught me about antibiotics. He taught us about iron. A Deutschlandtour had a book describing steel. He taught us the rudimentary tactics of war, strategies we used to dominate the jungle. Then I discovered this. He tossed the journal to me. I awkwardly caught it out of the air with one hand and looked at the cover. Art of War, pretty old too, I mused to myself. Looks handwritten. The cover's some sort of leather. I'd surmise it was copied from the original. Sten rested his elbows on his desk. Our Lord is either not the wise and intelligent man he claims to be, or he is holding back, refusing to give us more knowledge in an attempt to keep us under control. Sten scowled. I fought my way out of the arena to stop being a slave. I swore ever after to be a master, to have no one hold me back. He took out something and placed it on the table. I eyed it for a good long moment. A gun. My gun. Melted, but recognizable. I'd carried it with me mostly because you never know when a big chunk of metal will be useful in the jungle. Now, I find this. I find you. Sten glared at the gun spitefully. This weapon. Your armor. Your sword. They're not just advanced. They are beyond anything I could have imagined. We aren't just behind in technology. We're behind in so much more, aren't we? I fought my entire life to find freedom. But I've discovered my ignorance has shackled me all along. I'd sympathize more with you, if you weren't enslaving me, I said as bitingly as I could. I don't know man, it's just tough to relate to a guy who does that kind of thing. Oh, and you promised to send me, a dude with a broken fucking arm, into an arena to fight to the death. Really feeling for Spartacus about now. Sten smirked. How about if I propose a trade? A trade? I didn't say anything, just waited. He seemed to take that as a reason to continue. I want information. I have often made sure slaves who have value to me are kept from the arena. Men and women of all species who can aid me. Such as our weapons. He nodded towards the guards. Both of them stepped forward, holding out their weapons. After working with Tony and Fitz, as well as memories from my time as jury rig, I recognized Damascus steel on sight. Their swords had the swirling pattern of dark and light that I remembered. Nowadays, it was outclassed by many modern methods of forging. But around here, it might as well have been a lightsaber. Well, not quite as insane, but still stronger than the iron I'd seen everywhere by a wide margin. A Sorlord slave, a young woman about to enter the pits, told me she had been trained in forging, Sten said softly. I took a chance. And she made me blades the like of which I have never seen. She works for me now. Sten rose to his feet. I reward intelligence. I reward information and loyalty. And I can keep you from the arena. Keep you from dying. Just tell me about the world beyond. Sten looked calm, but I noted the way he swallowed. Tell me how it is grown. Is Rome standing? The Soviet Union? How far has science come? Tell me. And for the rest of your life, I will make sure you never go hungry. You can have women and men to sate your lusts upon, alcohol, sport. I cannot promise you everything, but you will have much in return for information. And if I just leave? Just turn my caramel brown ass around and head back home. Sten smirked. Not possible. No one can escape the savage land. Not even me. You are stuck in our world. But if you work with me, then you'll never be uncomfortable. Yeah, shows how much you know. Fact was, Bridge had managed to crack the entry/exit to the savage land. We hadn't figured out how to do the whole communication thing yet, but we could at least do that. But what Sten was offering was of strategic value, if not in the way he was thinking. His offer was time. Time to wait things out, survive, plan and escape. Maybe even time for the Omnitrix to repair itself if my increasing ability to understand Gresh was any proof. I could play along for a bit, pretend to work with the guy, Gresh, the people that I'd been captured with. How about my little breakfast club down in the cage? I asked cautiously. You gonna help them out too? Sten quirked his head. The other slaves? They're worthless to me. That's not true. I crossed one arm over the other. You want what I know? I'd like my new best friends to be safe. Sten scowled. That is not reasonable. I need fighters. The arena requires them. And these new slaves are useless as anything other than dying for the crowd. Well, yippee for them. I'm useful enough for all of them. I leaned forward to look Sten in the eyes. You want to know about smartphones, titanium, and the invention of the dab as the world's greatest dance move? That's my deal. My fellow prisoners don't go into your death games, and I will introduce you to anime. You seem like an ice guy kind of guy. Sten couldn't have looked more pissed if he'd tried. I will not put away everything I've worked for just to know. You will work with me, alone. Or you will die. Shit. That wasn't going to work. No deal. You are being unreasonable, Sten snarled. Good, I glared at him. I'm an avenger. A hero. Unreasonable is what we're about. We're a greedy bunch. You offer us our lives, and we take the lives of everyone around us. Ask for surrender, we steal a victory. Sten snapped to his feet and raised a fist to punch me. I got ready to roll with the blow. It never came. Instead, he glared at me. I'm giving you a chance to be logical. To realize that sacrificing yourself for men and women you've never met before is foolish. This is not some soft and cushy world. This is the savage land. We kill, survive, and grow. Martyrdom is useless. Simply another log on an already blazing flame. He wasn't entirely wrong. Doing this, sacrificing a good chance at survival for a few people, some of whom didn't even like me, was dumb. Nat would have beaten me red and blue for it. Tony would have made a sarcastic comment while giving me a grin like he was half proud, half pissed. Steve would have stood right beside me. And if we're being honest, I think they would have done the same thing I did. I told you, I'm an Avenger. We don't adapt to cruelty, I smiled. We break it. My deal is, don't put anyone into the arena that doesn't want to go in, and I will tell you everything about the world you want to know. Otherwise, I'll go into the arena and take my chances. Stan glared at me. Then he waved at the guards, who came up and grabbed me by each shoulder. I should have realized how crazy you were when I first saw you. Fighting a suicidal battle against an army of velociraptors. Yeah well, I said quickly while I was dragged away. You can't blame the raptors. They didn't know fighting me is always a suicidal battle. Hopefully, that sounded tough. Because I knew as I was dragged away that I'd done a very dumb thing. We were all quiet later as we were led out of our cages. It was the middle of the day now, long after Stend and I had spoken, we were guided into a room full of weapons and armor. After a random sore lord growled, everyone walked up and stared choosing something. I would have suggested going to for the escape then, but they locked the gates and raised some crude crossbows across the room, the guards watching all of us. With little choice, I got ready. Weapons. There were all kinds, all of them were made of the same iron. Guess we didn't get to play around with the Damascus steel Stend had shown off. I took a longsword for myself, placing it off to the side. Gresh took a pair of daggers, Demi a big axe. The German guy took a short spear. The wing girl took nothing. She sat in the corner and watched us all. The others, the people with wings, other reptiles, and humans, crowded to each other, trying their best to show affection despite the guards glaring. One of the guards stepped forward to stop some of the winged people from going over to Wing Girl, only for T-Rex guard to stop them. They came around her, touching her around the ripped-out section her wing had once been, crying for her and singing softly. I watched them for a while as I grabbed a piece of armor made of some sort of lacquered material. Then I looked around the room. I had a long sword. But I needed more weapons. The weapon that kept people alive for centuries. Cooperation. Chapter 143, Gladiator 2. I watched them for a while as I grabbed a piece of armor made of some sort of lacquered material. Then I looked around the room. I had a long sword. But I needed more weapons. The weapon that kept people alive for centuries. Cooperation. Anybody here speak English? I called out to the room around us. Everyone looked over at me. After a moment, a few of the humans hesitantly raised their hands. 3 of them. You guys also speak the language the Sorlords are using. One of them dropped their hands. I need a translator. You mind? One of the hands dropped like it was on fire. The last person, a short and skinny young man that looked like he was in his late teens, looked terrified. But he clenched his fist and nodded at me shakily. Good. I walked up with my long sword and stood next to him. Repeat after me. And if anyone has questions, translate. K. The kid nodded nervously. He had blonde hair covered in dirt, was wearing brown rags, and his blue eyes were shaky. He was a twitchy kid. But he was meeting my eyes. Okay. We're about to go into that arena and fight something to the death. The kid hesitated before he began to speak in that hissing and growling language that seemed to be the common language here. The other prisoners stared at me, then at him. So we need a plan. I want to get in there and survive. More than that, I want all of you to survive too. German guy snapped to his feet and hissed. Some of the Sorlord prisoners joined him, a couple of humans shouting in German. The kid looked scared as he turned to me. They're asking why they should listen to you. They also said something bloody mean. They just have to get to know me first. I grinned at him. I was faking so much confidence. I had no idea if any of these guys would listen to me or not. But they had to. We had to coalesce, to work together as a team. I tried to mimic Steve, to stand the way Captain America did, to project my voice. I didn't know if I was the best warrior here or anything, but no one else has stepped up to try and bring us together. Not to be arrogant, but none of these guys were likely to have seen what I had in terms of being outclassed in a fight. Hopefully. God, please don't let this be a mistake. Are any of you warriors? I asked. The kid translated. Some of the group grumbled, looking at each other. Then you know that those of our little suicide squad that aren't fighters are going to die. German guy stilled at that. We have elderly, injured and kids in this little group. I looked around at everyone. No time to be kind or settle. Just lay it all on the table, Mahmoud. People who will be first on the chopping block. But if we work together, we can have each other's backs, support each other, keep each other safe. I took a step forward, then hopped up onto a table. I was trying to keep moving, to keep all eyes on me. Some of you hate each other. Maybe it's a generational grudge. Maybe you've been at war with each other. I met eyes with German guy. But is that going to matter when we're all going to be trying to survive? A Sorlord spoke then. He was hissing at first. He stopped. When he spoke again, it was in English. Surprised the hell out of me, until I noticed the Omnitrix had begun to glow just a bit brighter. No, you won't just hide behind us, the Allosaurus Sorlord said. You've got a broken arm. What good are you? He asked if you were going to fight with the rest of us, even with a broken arm. The kid wasn't just translating. He was asking the same question. Of course I'm fighting, I scoffed. Everyone in the room looked startled. I guess the Omnitrix translator was kicking in strong. I'm frontline, broken arm, or not. Nobody dies before I do if I can help it. Got some skeptical looks for that. Couldn't blame them. I was terrified at the idea of dying. I liked my life now, but I couldn't let these people die. Look, I get it. I'm not one of you. You have no idea of knowing if you can trust me, I waved around. But that's your advantage. I'm the only here who doesn't have a grudge. I don't give a shit who you are or where you come from. All I know is, we're being sent in to die, and I've been trained to be able to handle it. We group up, grab the right weapons, support each other, and this becomes a fight we can win, instead of one where we die. And hey, I shrugged. We're all going together. What we got to lose by working together? There was a moment of silence. I swung my longsword onto my shoulder and looked around. So how about it, folks? Wanna go to war together? Nobody cheered the way they did whenever Steve did one of his speeches. But I guess things were just hopeless enough that people were willing to listen to the loudest voice in the room. All right then, I looked over at Gresh. Gresh buddy, how good are you with those daggers? He stared at me for a long moment before blinking, like he'd only noticed right then that I was speaking to him. He spoke, and for the first time I heard Gresh speak English. I was taught by my mother. I can hiss, grack. Heat, kaa can fight as well. The Omnitrix cut out part way through, but he was nodding towards some of the members of his race, who straightened. Great, I looked around, marking things out. The people I'd been carted in with had been joined by more people, so we had about, 26 people? Seemed like a lot for a gladiator fight, but it would do. Okay, I have a plan. I laid things out while the Sorlord guards watched blankly. Guess they didn't mind us strategizing. What did they care? We were going to die anyway. Gresh helped me with my armor. I must have made an impression on him because my former bully seemed more amiable all of a sudden. The armor I was wearing now was ill-fitting. Guess Stent hadn't taken my measurements. Still, it was the best one I could wear. The armor was a mixture of Roman and medieval style, like a gladiator and knight had come together to design it. And it was all crap. Just mismatching iron and leather. But it's better than nothing. The chest piece was an iron vest, dented and beaten, with the chest showing the image of a screaming ape. My shoulders and right forearm had leather of different colors and designs to protect them. I'd chosen to use an iron piece of armor to protect my left arm. With the right one out of commission, it was best to protect the one I could fight with. My left leg had the only piece of armor I could find that could fit either one of my legs. The sea thighs apparently don't always save lives. So I was looking pretty asymmetrical as we were all lined up and forced to head toward the gates. I did, of course, take time to really support my broken arm, reinforcing it with extra padding made from pieces of leather and a dagger too dull to cut anything. If anything was going to get me killed, I didn't want it to be my right arm breaking again somehow. Gresh and I stood side by side near the front. I had asked someone to take the first steps out of the door after making sure they were confident in their abilities. Still, I felt guilty for it. So as we walked, I spoke to them. Hey, you want any help? A feminine voice as smooth as silk spoke back to me. No need. You were right to place me in front. I can take any blows the moment the door opens, allowing you and Gresh to survey the area and strike with me. I appreciate your concern. The Omnitrix must have glitched again because the next words from them sounded like a boulder cracking. Got it. I looked around. The 26 people around me looked scared, nervous, angry, calm. I felt almost happy, personally. I was tired of waiting for a fight. I was beginning to breathe a bit easier. Sure, I was still scared and tense. But the wait had been the worst part. We came to a set of large doors. They were made of cheap wood, with the sunlight outside coming in shafts of light. The Sorlord guards locked metal gates behind us, leaving us to stand in the dark hallway. Dust floated in the air, the scent of sweat and piss noticeable, along with the copper tones of blood that had soaked this place for years. I looked at the people around me. When those doors open, I shouted to everyone around me. German guy raised a hammer. Then all hell breaks loose. But that's okay, the Allosaurus Sorlord who had questioned me earlier snarled, his long slashing teeth clenched. Because we have each other's backs. Don't falter. Don't give up. I clenched my sword high. They wanted to sacrifice us. So we make them pay. Understand? Make them pay. Gresh shouted. Say it. Make them pay. The German guy yelled. Make them pay. It was panicky. Desperate. But as everyone around me said it, I began to shout. Don't stop. Let them hear you. Make them pay. Gryak. The Sorlords shouted. The winged men and women sang out. My fellow humans roared. The lizard men barked out. And in front of me, the sound of a mountain shattering erupted. Make them pay. Make them pay. The doors swept open. Outside, a T-Rex Sorlord, laughing in enough armor to cover a tank, rushed forward swinging a sword. He'd been planning on striking while we were bottlenecked in the tunnel. Dick move. And his mistake. Demi stepped forward to meet him. The T-Rex was startled when his sword bounced off of the stone person's skin, right before Demi's fist smashed into his chest, the sounds of ribs breaking barely discernible. I rushed around her body and stabbed out. I knew this would suck. Killing people was something I'd never get used to. But in the choice between this and death, I was able to push myself through the feel of my sword stabbing through scales to enter the T-Rex Sorlord's chest. The cheering of the arena around us was immense. I ignored it. We had work to do. In front of us, a group of men and women of varying types faced us. All Sorlords. and all way better equipped than we were. Not to mention, all uninjured, young and more muscular than Enold on his best day. I counted them up, ignoring Gresh as he leaped forward with a shrill screech to bring the T-Rexide stabbed to the ground, blood spraying while the savage lizard man stabbed the dying dinosaur to death. 20 people, well, 19 if you didn't count the guy Gresh was stabbing, spread out across the battlefield. 15 of them were Sorlords. Combined with the guy I'd stabbed, that was 16 Sorlords of varying subspecies, most of them being the bigger types. Bit biased if you asked me. The remaining 4 were human, all just a little smaller than me in muscle and height. As for the battlefield, while it did have the sand that I expected and was shaped like the Great Colosseum in Rome, there was something I hadn't expected. Physical obstacles. There was a chariot that had been tipped over and half destroyed in front of us, some crappy weapons strewn all about, and boulders. 2 big ones resting randomly in the field, one the size of an RV, the other in the shape of a pillar. Those opened up options. Aryans, take the platform. I barked, pointing out the biggest rock. The winged people, who were the aforementioned Aryans, flew upward. There was a large cage surrounding the top of the arena, but they had enough room to fly up to the platform and land. Winggirl watched them before running to join me. Gresh and Demi. German guy roared while running with his own group. In some attempt to get us all out alive, I'd made the most basic of strategies. The fact was, I'd need months of work to get us all working with any amount of synergy. So instead, I just had to mash us all into groups based on who could fight and who needed help. Sadly, there weren't a lot of fighters in our group. Counting Winggirl, there were 6 Aryans. I advised them to grab long-range weapons like spears so they could provide air support. Even though 2 were an elderly couple and 1 was a kid in the middle of his teens, they were the best I had to work with. Luckily the 2 left over were a former hunter and a warrior. They were only 6 out of our group though, 26 people, and I was pretty sure a lot of us would die. I tried my best to mitigate it, to group everyone up and make up strategies for them to follow. But of our group, there were just too many injured, elderly and inexperienced. Whatever. Focus on the battle. Move to help when you can, but focus on the fight. In front of me was a group of 3, one red-headed human woman carrying a trident and net, a Pterosaur with green skin holding a short sword, and the biggest one, a Triceratops man holding a giant battle axe in one hand and a shield in the other. Gresh, new targets. I barked out while running forward. He snarled, rather than answer me, flipping off the T-Rex and moving forward. Demi, slower than us, went in as well, Winggirl hovering in the background. The plan was surprise at the start. Don't fall into the enemy pattern. Instead, rush in and take the flow of battle for ourselves. I headed for the pterosaur, moving as fast as I could. The pterosaur, who had been temporarily horrified at the death of the T-Rex, adjusted quickly, raising his blade to meet me. We met in the center and began to clash, my long sword and his short sword clacking together. He was faster and stronger than me, but I had reach and technique. My broken arm meant I couldn't take the advantage as well as I wanted, so I had to work twice as hard. He stabbed at my stomach. I dodged and tried to take his head off with a short cutting slice. He ducked under it and stepped back. I noted the way the guy was built. Despite being a pterosaur hybrid, he didn't have wings. Instead, it seemed like he was designed for speed, with lean muscles and quick reactions. Best for me to face him. I parried a sword slice at my arm, our blades clanging on contact. Gresh sped past me to head for the human woman, who raised the net in her hands high. The Triceratops ran for Winggirl, Demi moving to intercept. Then I was forced to focus on my opponent. I raised my sword high and brought it down as fast as I could. My opponent raised his blade to block it. Too bad it was a feint. I pulled my arms in during my swing, bringing my sword to my hip, then thrusting forward while twisting my hips out. Rack. My sword sliced through flesh again, entering through the pterosaur's chest. He gasped in pain, stabbing at me again. I tried to back away, but he was too close. His sword entered my right shoulder. Fuck. I hissed, pulling back. He swiped at me as I pulled away, the short sword slicing into my cheek. He fell to his knees as blood poured from the new hole in his chest. I stared at him hard, sword raised, then slashed outward to cut into his throat. I ignored the horror deep inside me at the fact I'd killed again to spin on my heel and rush for Gresh. Gresh had gotten wrapped up in the human woman's net and was trying to cut himself out. As he sliced his way out using his daggers, he snarled and shouted, looking enraged as his blades slid across the ropes. I tried to warn him. Rishiarius, fighters who wore light armor and carried tridents and nets to battle, were pretty famous when it came to Roman gladiators. They were among the worst kinds of fighters to take on, trapping you in their nets before striking with a trident while you were trapped. A simple and dangerous tactic. I heard they had a rough reputation, but I gave less than a shit about that. What mattered was that this woman was trying to stab Gresh with the trident. I slashed out at her while she was trying to bring the 3 points down on his skull. She was forced to dodge but still got him in the thigh. Gresh shouted out in pain as a single spike sliced through his scales, then pulled back out with barbed hooks when the woman pulled back to face me. I tried to stab her in the throat, but she twirled her trident to send my thrust out to her right. She reached for her side, where a dagger was hanging, taking it up to stab at me. Cursing, I stepped back. The woman snarled at me in frustration. Somewhere behind me, I could hear the sound of metal bouncing on stone as Demi and the Triceratops battled. Gresh was slicing himself out of the net. and the sound of someone dying filled the air from where I'd last seen the other fighters. I raised my sword and took a deep breath. The stab wound I'd gained on my shoulder was sore, but adrenaline let me ignore it a bit. The Rishi Arias woman in front of me was unharmed and pissed. Whatever happened next, it wasn't going to end clean. I rushed forward and got ready to put more blood on my hands. That or die. Chapter 144, Gladiator 3. I slammed my blade against the shaft of the Rishi Arias woman's trident. She tried to twist away, but I forced my weight into my blade, making it a battle of strength. Against the Sore Lords, I was less confident in that kind of fight. But most of the humans I'd met in the Savage Land were not as well fed as I was. It's something people don't tend to think about. Modern humans have a massive amount of access to protein, fat and calories, so that when we worked out we could get to truly immense sizes. Despite what people think, most primitive people didn't look like Hercules. Actually, where the hell was that guy? Did he exist in this version of Marvel? Thoughts for later assuming I survived. Even this woman, despite her physical health, wasn't Captain America. I actually trained with that guy. She was finally forced back, dodging the slice I followed up with. She was pretty skilled. Must have been fighting a lot longer than I was. I tried to bring my sword up, but with one arm down, I wasn't able to maneuver my sword as easily as I was used to, getting nothing but empty air with my slice. Damn it, I mumbled to myself. Never had to adjust to using one arm for so long. She twirled her trident around and stabbed it out. I sidestepped it and tried to get in her range to cut of a hand, only for her to kick out at me, keeping me back. We both lashed out with our weapons. The clack 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 sound of longsword and trident hitting each other filled the air between us. My heart beating in my chest like a drum. I wanted to kill this woman. Not because I hated her, but because she wanted to kill me. Most pure and horrifying reason in the world. We stepped back and forth, growling and hissing, our weapons clattering against each other, sweat dripping along with blood, stinging my wounds. It was in the middle of that chaotic exchange that Gresh sliced his way out of the net. He was on his feet and rushing forward in an instant, a sound coming from his lips like a revving engine. The woman stepped back in a panic. I let Gresh get to her, the lizard man bringing his daggers forward to try and stab her as she blocked with her trident. In that moment, when she was distracted by hundreds of pounds of scales and rage, I sliced her stomach open. The disgusting smell of blood exploded into the air as her intestines spilled out. She stared at me blankly. I looked away, running to the next fight. That look on her face. Her, the pterosaur. Seeing their faces. One human, the other a Sore Lord. They'd been horrified, hateful, shocked and desperate. And then just, gone. Then I pushed that down. We were all fighting. All killing. Later, I'd think about that. But right then, I was on to the next fight. Gresh, back up the others. I shouted. Stop stealing Gresh's kills, he shouted back. Then go get some more. I ran past him to head to Demi and Wing Girl, who were still battling the Triceratops. One group of our people, 4 of them, had been killed off to the side. I couldn't see around the big rock in the center of the arena, but I imagined those weren't the only deaths. The 4 I could see lying dead had been murdered by a Anklo Lord with a great sword and a Raptor Lord with a spear, both rushing towards Demi and Wing Girl from behind. On top of the rock platform, one of the Aryans tossed a spear at the Anklo Lord, only to have it bounce off his armored hide. With Gresh rushing around the boulder to find his own prey, Demi, Wing Girl, and I were on our own. 2 people, both down a limb, and stone person against 3 powerful and healthy Sore Lords. We'd have to make our stand. Demi was trying her. I still wasn't sure if Demi had gender, but Demi's voice was very feminine, so my brain defaulted to female pronouns. Something to ask about when we were not fighting to death. Best to take down the Triceratops she was fighting, swinging her mace at the Sore Lord with crushing blows. Still, strong as she was, she had none of Thor's speed, who was the only person I knew was a true master of maces and hammers. The Triceratops slipped around a swing that smashed the ground he'd been standing on, then swung his own axe at her. The metal scraped against stone, sending up a shower of sparks. A small line was carved into her face, adding to the dozens more she had. Demi released a sound like concrete being poured, and raised a fist to try and punch him, only for the Triceratops to sidestep it. Damn it. He was fast as hell for such a big guy. Wing Girl, meanwhile, had turned her back to Demi to face the Ankleo and Raptor running for her. She raised her spear in her hand and stared in fear as the pair came towards her. I headed for her, trying to get myself there in time. As I came up, an idea came to me. Jump. I shouted desperately. She spun to look at me with that pale blue face, not understanding. Up, get behind them. Still uncomprehending. It was only when she was moment from getting hit by the Ankleo that her single wing spread out. The single wing beat the air as she jumped upwards. For just a moment, it was beautiful. Ankleo and Raptor stared up at her, coming to a brief stop in their shock. Her face, when she took off like that. She must have been stronger and lighter than she looked, because she really lifted off. Then reality hit. She spun ungainly through the air as she reached the apex of her jump. I could see the horror, sadness, and panic in her expression. Land. I shouted as loud as I could, coming in on the Raptor with a swing. He stopped gaping at the sight of Wing Girl to raise his spear to block me. I smashed my longsword against the shaft of his spear, metal on metal sparking for just an instant. Land and fight. I don't know if she heard me. All I know is that, in the middle of her fall, she stopped trying to fly and pulled her wing in. With the luck that only comes in the best of moments, she managed to land behind our opponents, spinning to face them frantically. Then the raptor and I started trying to kill each other while the Ankylo spun to face Wing Girl. I swung, parried, blocked, kicked, dodged a claw headed for my stomach before taking a slice to chest from the spear. I stabbed the raptor in the shoulder for a shallow wound, twisted to parry his spear thrust aside, then stepped into his guard to shoulder rush him, throwing him back. Far behind my opponent, behind where Wing Girl was trying to stave off the Ankylosaur, I could see some of my people fighting off some Saur Lords. The Allosaur was on her own, battling two Saur Lords. I kicked out at the raptor, my foot sinking into his stomach, then shouted up to the Aryans still on the rock. Help her. I pointed at the Allosaur. The Aryans were in bad shape. The elderly couple were dead, spears thrown into them, and the kid was crying as he huddled in a ball. But the two left over leaped off the rock to fly over the Allosaur, supporting her with thrown spears before flying down to pick them up and throw them again. Behind me, Demi caught the Triceratops axe by the blade. With a sound like brick shattering, she roared, squeezing hard. The blade crunched and bent until it was crumpled steel in her hands. The raptor I was fighting rolled to his feet. Wing Girl was retreating, and the sounds of the dying and wounded melded with the sound of a cheering crowd. I grit my teeth, clenched the blood-soaked grip of my sword, and rushed forward. Stand/slaving asshole. Stend watched calmly from the stands, eyes panning across the battlefield. All around him, Saur Lords, humans, lizardmen and people of other species cheered and shouted at the bloodshed below. This little fight was supposed to be nothing but an exhibition. A brief battle to exercise the warriors. Instead, one of the strongest warriors of the arena had died in the opening moments. Since then, the crowd started cheering louder and louder, losing themselves to the excitement of the arena. As the outsider dueled with Errand, a raptor Saur Lord, Stend felt two people walk up to join him, walking up along to his right. He looked over at them. I see you've once again decided against wearing your traditional robes, Lord Stend, the smaller of the men said with a slow smile. He was an orange-scaled pterosaur lord, built larger than the others in the crowd. He wore a white toga across his body and a single sword on his left hip. Stend ignored the comment on clothing. Ever since reading about the fashions of the ancient Greco-Romans, he'd decided against wearing the traditional robes. More proof of his theories that the Saur Lord society was nothing but a copy of already outdated ones. Instead, he turned and bowed. My lords, I had not expected you until the main event. The larger man didn't respond. He simply stared down at the arena with his arms crossed. He was a full head taller than almost every other being in the Colosseum, even the Brontosaurus lords. His scales were a muted yellow that bunched and twisted atop layers of muscles like steel. His frill was high and spiked, his paired horns stacked one atop the other and his eyes were sunken into his skull. His eyes were the color of fire. Well, we weren't planning on it, the pterosaur said, looking up at the larger man. Lord Styro and myself were attracted by the calls of the stadium. Rather interesting to hear that for a simple exhibition. To say the least, Lord Stan told the orange Saur Lord. It was supposed to be a simple exercise. But the slaves I have recently captured had more fight in them than I expected. Lord Styro turned to look at Stend. For a moment, Stend stared back. Those eyes, like a blazing flame, seemed to burn with more ferocity than normal. Then Styro looked up. Stend did so as well. High above, he circled. The Lord of all Saur Lords. Their king, floating on the winds, watching them. End the fight, Lord Styro said. The useless ones are already dead. Your slaves are strong. They will fight another day. Styro looked down at the arena. Who led them? The outsider, Stend said without hesitation. His guards had told him of the outsider's attempts to rally the slaves. Stend approved. Seeing them fight together, prove they could defeat a stronger foe, only made the outsider and the slaves more valuable. He'd still need to be punished. But that was fine. Styro waved to a man standing near a bell. The man nodded, raising a hammer before slamming it into the bell. Mahmoud /dial. The raptor took a slash to the face, blood spray hitting my face. Demi finally got a hold of the Triceratops, raising him into the air. Wing Girl screamed when the Ankylo swung his tail, the mace-like end of it almost taking her head off. Raptor reached out to attack me. Wing Girl screamed again. I felt something in me snap. Nat had taught me more than once that holding back in the wrong moment could lead someone to get hurt. That lesson never screamed louder than right then. A loud ringing sound came from somewhere. I ignored it. Instead, I watched the raptor's spear come once more for my heart. Then I twisted down. The blade of the spear sliced open my face, a white-hot line of pain screaming at me as metal opened skin like a zipper. I ignored it, stepped forward and stabbing. My sword entered the raptor's shoulder, exiting out the other side, before I tackled him. Using my sword like a handle, I lifted him up and ran, muscles screaming, legs burning, until we hit the Ankylosaur from behind, bringing him down. Then, the sound of footsteps filled the arena. I ignored them, rising up to. Something hit me from the side. A person. I was tackled to the ground and held there by someone, while a blade was held to my throat. I stilled at the feel of the cold steel, looking around frantically. Chapter 145, Hauser. Something hit me from the side. A person. I was tackled to the ground and held there by someone, while a blade was held to my throat. I stilled at the feel of the cold steel, looking around frantically. Guards. All wearing the same black armor, pouring into the arena. They separated the fighters, bringing the battle to a halt. Gresh, who had been stabbing one person that he had tackled to the rock pillar, snarled when he was forced to stop, but rose to his feet. Demi dropped the corpse of the Triceratops, whose head had been beaten in. One of the Aryans rose to his feet, clutching his abdomen. Well done, warriors. The guard pinning me down lifted me to my feet roughly, allowing me to look up at Stand. You have earned your right to survive, he grinned down at me. Yes? This was a magnificent battle, truly worthy entertainment? Thank you all. As a reward, you may all witness the next bout. Stand made sure his eyes met mine. Till the next time, warriors. The guards began shoving and pushing us inside as the crowd cheered. I counted up the survivors as we walked. Well, hobbled. There had been 27 people on my side, 20 on the other. Out of 47 people, only 24 had survived. 23 people, dead, just like that. We'd lost 10 people, and the enemy had lost 13. Numbers had given us an advantage. But it still felt like we lost. Or at least, neither side had won. Asymmetrical warfare is like that. Win-loss-draw. It's all relative. For us, survival was the only way to win. No, in fact, no longer being enslaved, free to leave the stadium, go back home, have our captors imprisoned. That was total victory for me. For Stend and the Sore Lords, having us fight on their behalf willingly, even eagerly, giving them a good show and staying useful. That was total victory for them. In this case, we had to take what we could. We had survived, despite losing a lot of people, getting injured, and still being enslaved to possibly do this crap again. And they were entertained, despite losing slaves and having one of the last surviving ones more than ready to kick their asses the second I had a chance. Still, that was the nature of things. Asymmetrical warfare. Where nobody wins, just loses less than the other guy. I kept that to myself. We were shoved into a room together. Both groups of people. There was a tense moment as we shared a look. The warriors whose friends I'd killed glared at us. The raptor I'd stabbed in the shoulder glared at me, growling. I smiled a bit. Gresh barked out something that made the guards tense. German guy, who had survived the fight, looked exhausted but yelled something as well, to which one of the humans on the other team yelled back. Then more slaves poured in, carrying two things more sacred at that moment than any temple: food and medicine. We calmed down, waiting patiently as we were treated. With some chairs nearby and a big metal grating that showed the arena outside, we had a nice view of the next fight. It took some time for them to clear the bodies out. I watched, trying to hold back from flinching, as the bodies of my allies and those I had murdered were pulled out. Once done, the cleaners left the arena as fast as possible, with terrified looks on their faces. I watched through the grate as a young man started to treat me. I was roughed up. I had 2 large cuts on my face, a big hole in my shoulder, and bruised everywhere. Plus, all the combat hadn't done anything good for my previous wounds anyways. He put paste into the cuts and tried his best to work with me. I wasn't a good patient. I was watching the arena. Ladies and gentlemen, Stan stood out in the stands on a pedestal, his hands wide. What a show! A simple exhibition match turned into a true test between warriors on equal ground. Equal ground my ass. I'd failed those who ended up lying on the ground of that arena, but things hadn't been anywhere near equal. But now, we have our main event. Stan pointed at one of the bigger doors on the side of the arena. 3 great beasts of our great land, brought to you to battle to the death against the Red Devil. Slowly, one of the gates opened. Behind me, one of the guys who had pushed us along spoke to another guard. Red? The damn thing is orange. Wait, what the fuck? I spun to look at the speaker, startled. Stend wanted to call it red, the other Sore Lord said with a shrug. Whatever. Still a damned monster. Orange? Wait, so who? The slowly rising gate exploded outward, the being behind it tearing it out of the wall with horrific ease. It leaped into the arena and glared around with glowing yellow eyes. I stared at it, my jaw dropping in shock. Horns. That was the first thing that popped into my head. It had long curling horns on either side of its head and one on the back of its his neck, with a purple membrane stretching down to its back. My right eye twitched, all my aches and pains fading to the back of my mind in favor of the beast in front of me. His body was stacked with muscles bunching up under dark orange scales that came on the edge of being red. A pair of small wings extended from the base of his tail. I clenched my left fist, trying to understand what was happening. His lower legs were armored in some kind of bird-like carapace, the long slashing nails a deep purple. That's not Devil Dinosaur, I said weakly. Hauser. Hauser from Red Earth, his mouth wrapped in a giant muzzle that kept his lips together. He couldn't roar, but his eyes flickered with power as he raised his head to look around. The earth rumbled under his steps, as though rather than his weight causing it, the earth dragon was trying to control his own element. He jumped into the air, reaching the height of the iron cage surrounding the arena, and landed on the center of the large rock platform, looking around angrily. So, my escape plan hadn't changed, but it had gotten a lot more interesting to say the least. Stend looked down at me. I tried to school my features, but I don't know if he caught the shock and awe on my face or not. Before I could say or do anything, Stend waved a hand. One of the other gates rose up, 3 shadows prowling inside before they began to exit. Our current champion of beasts will battle 3 allosaurs. Ferocious beasts, strong and hungry, left without food for a full week. Let us see how he fares against them, shall we? Compared to Hauser's explosive entrance, the 3 allosaurs entered with almost a grace to them. They had a soft coating across their bodies that gave them a striping of brown patterns through their almost inky black feathers. They looked pissed off as they prowled into the arena. And, unlike Hauser, their mouths had no muzzles, allowing them to roar as they stepped forward. Then they saw Hauser, freezing. Their nostrils twitched. Hauser glared down at them from his perch. 1 week. That's how long Sten said they'd been without food. That could drive anyone mad. And you could see it in their eyes. Madness and hunger. They roared. Hauser crouched. I was standing at the grate with my left hand wrapped around the bars so tight my knuckles had gone white, my eyes straining to take in every detail. The allosaurs charged Hauser with blistering speed, covering the ground between them and sending sand flying about in arcs. Hauser waited until the lead one got close to the rock. Then he jumped up into the air. No animal that big should ever be able to jump like that. But Hauser did it, soaring over the 3 allosaurs like a more traditional dragon, heading for the one in the back. As he did so, the horn on top of his head moved, coming down to point over his head like a spear. He hit the allosaur in back like Mjolnir, the earth shaking once more under his weight. The allosaur screamed. Hauser wrapped his talons around the dinosaur's neck and stabbed downward, once, twice, 3 times, blood spraying into the air as the horn on his head split flesh. The other 2 allosaurs spun to face him, one rushing him from behind. With incredible agility, Hauser released his first victim and turned to face the dinosaur trying to kill him. When the allosaur lashed out with its teeth to try and bite Hauser in the throat, Hauser stepped back just before his throat could be bitten and turned in place, his tail snapping like a whip as he twirled at high speed on 1 foot. Orange tail hit black feathers with a mean slapping sound, teeth flying out of the allosaurus mouth as they shattered. The allosaur staggered back while Hauser came back around to face him. The earth dragon raised one leg and kicked out, the long purple talons on his feet cutting through the air. The allosaur tried to retreat, but got hit by the deadly kick to its chest. Hauser spun around the other way, tail whipping once more to hit the allosaurus and send it flying back into the rock platform, where it lay unmoving. The last allosaur stared at Hauser. Hauser stared back. For a moment, I could see what the smaller dinosaur was thinking about, the wish to run. But he was trapped. And from the look of excitement on Sten's face high above, he wasn't getting an out. Left with no option, the allosaurus roared and charged Hauser. The dragon couldn't roar in response, but he charged forward as well, the horn on the top of his head lowering down once more. Both dinosaurs met. I stumbled, almost thrown to the ground by the force of their impact, keeping my eyes on the fight. Hauser, as the dinosaur and dragon wrestled, got under the other behemoth and lifted the allosaurus off the ground. He tossed him into the wall of the arena, the wall shaking with the impact. Then he hit him with the force of a train, his horns slicing into the dinosaur with ease before the rest of his body followed, the wall behind the allosaurus cratering behind it as it was killed. The crowd roared. The allosaurus died. And Hauser, removing his horns from the dead dinosaur, looked around. Red Devil. With blood spilled across his face, dripping down his horns, he looked at. Then he saw someone. Another Saur Lord, this one standing next to Sten. A big yellow one that towered beside his peers, a ceratopsian like a triceratops. Hauser's eyes blazed. He raised his head and tensed his muscles. You didn't have to be a genius to tell that he was ready to kill, and his target was Big Yellow. Guards. Sten roared, panic in his voice for the first time. Hauser leaped for the yellow guy. He hit the cage hard, falling back to the ground. Still enraged, he twisted to his feet like some mix of T-Rex and gymnast, just back to grab the cage. I could hear a low enraged hissing sound as he clung to the side of the iron cage, bashing his head into it. The cage squealed, and the spectators began to run as Hauser tried to rip his way through the cage. Guards. Sten shouted. The yellow guy didn't move. He stood there, wrapped in his toga, hands clenched behind his back and cocked his head to the side, staring at Hauser. Hauser would have been roaring if it hadn't been for the muzzle around his jaws. As I watched, the muzzle began to rip, one of the straps coming undone. But Hauser was too pissed to just wait for the muzzle to come apart. Instead, he tried to force himself through the cage. Metal squealed as his talons bent at them, his arms pulling the bars apart. Shoot him. Sten shouted at the Saurlord guards that surrounded arena ran up to the cage, metal bending and cracking as Hauser tried to force himself through. Shoot him. The guards raised something to their mouths. Blowpipes. That explained what had knocked me out before, when I had been in the jungle. As I continued to watch, they fired, little darts piercing Hauser's skin while others fell to the ground or missed. Hauser snarled, finally able to make the sound. With a sound like nails on a chalkboard, the cage bent enough for his head to pass through. He snarled again, pressing through. But he was slowing down. I don't know what was in those darts, but apparently it was fast acting and 30 or so were starting to affect the big guy. His eyes were drifting closed. The top horn on his head was sinking back to lay flat on his head. He reached his head out for the yellow guy. The yellow guy, once Hauser had come close enough, stepped forward. Then, he cocked his fist back and unleashed a haymaker into Hauser. The punch was worthy of any of my superhuman friends or forms, launching Hauser back. He fell back into the arena and hit the ground with earth-shaking force for the last time. The guards kept shooting him even as he tried to struggle to his feet. The big dinosaur gave the yellow Saurlord a hate-filled glare. His muzzle loosened, beginning to come undone. I saw something between his jaws, beginning to flicker to life. Then his eyes closed, and Hauser slowly limped to the ground. More darts hit him for a minute or so, but the big guy was done. Yellow Lord smirked and turned away. Fuck, Gresh said next to me. At some point, we'd all stood at the grating, watching our fellow prisoner fight. I nodded slowly, then looked for Stand. He looked back at me. Then he turned and walked off. Then, the Omnitrix blinked. I looked down at it, tense. For just a moment, green flashed, blinking 3 times. Then it went back to white. I subtly tried to hide it from the guards, but Demi and Gresh, who stood on either side of me, noticed. Bringing the Omnitrix to rub against the wall, I twisted the dial, tried to press it, have it do something. Still nothing. Okay, it was okay. The Omnitrix was coming back. And when it did, I was going to carpet bomb this entire place to the ground. Chapter 146, Hunt 2. X and Craven, Jungle Steel. X walked up to Craven. The hunter and android had been walking together ever since leaving the caves and finding their way back to the river and had now come upon something Craven had wished to investigate. A trail, this one headed in the same direction as them. X watched Craven as he sniffed the air, pressed his palm to the tracks, and generally wasted an infuriating amount of time. We need to move on, X said firmly. Craven looked up at X, then away. Not yet. I'm trying to get a sense for the animals that made these tracks. To understand them. I do not care. We need to find Dial. The hunter stood up and turned to scowl at X, and that is what I am doing. I know you believe that a search requires smashing the jungle beneath your feet with all the subtlety of a drill to a watermelon, but I have some experience with this sort of thing. That was true. X didn't have the full files, but Craven was well reputed for the times he had helped with rescues in the wilderness whenever a tourist, child, or fool got lost. How may I help? X finally said. Ah, Craven sighed. That is the question I wanted from you. Now, while Craven does have excellent senses you just referred to yourself in the third person, X said dryly. Please, Craven is speaking. Now, even with my senses being as acute as they are useless without context, without understanding. So, I must study my prey's movements first. For example, here, Craven walked about 20 feet away and kneeled down, pressing his palm against the dirt. The animals walked in a pack, following something similar to the patterns of wolves. They were larger animals, as tall as a man. Predators, based on the fact that they never stopped to devour the foliage. And their feet are interesting. Similar to that of birds of prey, but with a single long talon on each foot, made to slice and into prey. A descendant of raptors, X said. Possibly, Craven stood. But the talon is a boon to us. Here, the talon is lowered to the ground, relaxed, not ready for use. Further down, Craven walked 40 feet up along the river. The pack hesitates. The talons raise. And they begin to move with purpose. They sensed prey. We should confirm if our part-time alien was the target. This way, Craven began to run, leaving X to follow. X was glad. If Craven had stood there talking for a moment longer, he would have lost his temper. When they got to the site, they found they weren't the first to arrive. In a bamboo forest, they found a makeshift shelter formed out of bamboo, a fire that had gone out long ago, makeshift spears, and the dead bodies of 3 animals. And blood. Blood spilled in spots where the raptors hadn't fallen. X walked forward slowly. Craven, explain the sequence of events as you say them, X said softly, his southern accent faded to something more robotic. The Russian hunter didn't respond. He simply strode forward and began to roam the camp. He stared at the corpses, the fire, the shelter, took a sniff of the air, examined the blood on one of the spears, then stared off into the bamboo forest. Your boy bedded down for the night. He was walking along the river and stopped here because of the bamboo, using it for tools and water, obviously. I can smell something similar to scorpion meat, so he must have found a couple of them if the scent is this strong. Prehistoric scorpions could be several feet in length, X interrupted. Craven blinked. A savage smile of excitement grew on his face for a moment before he shook his head. Well, he was attacked by these big boys. But when he managed to fight and kill 3 of them, the others ran off. Big boys like this eat on the spot after all, so his corpse would have been laid here, and there would be signs of feeding even if he'd been dragged off later by scavengers. Then, Craven strode around the fire, his gait low. X had noticed that about him. He didn't walk the way a human usually did. Not even like the various spies and martial artists X had interacted with. He walked like, well, like some combination of man and big cat. Here, Craven leaned down and reached down. When his hand came up, a single dart was held in his hand. Craven smirked. They caught your boy at his weakest. Bleeding, Craven pointed at a spot of red on the floor. Exhausted. They hit him with this. Craven sniffed the needle. I've used similar toxins. But it's hard. They need to be the exact dosage. Too much and you get an overdose death. Too little and you just get a pissed off target. Whoever shot this knew what they were doing. They wanted him alive. Craven pocketed the dart and stood. Their footsteps come up to him. When they leave, they're deeper. Dial is alive. And we have an actual trail to him now. No more river following, my dear X. Just the hunt. The last word was said with intense relish. X nodded. Good. Strange, Craven looked around. I wonder Craven stopped, eyes narrowing. X heard the same sound in the same instant. It rushed out of the jungle about 40 feet from them, shaking the ground with its footsteps. It was utterly silent beside that. This was an ambush after all. Craven and X spun to face the beast. In the split second they had, Craven took in the sight of the animal. His eyes came alight with an eager flame. X recognized the Tyrannosaurus Rex on sight. Despite being heavy with muscle, its back covered in black and red fur-like feathers with a bare, scaly face, and moving faster than had been predicted, there were too many indicators to ignore the fact. X hypothesized it to be about 8 metric tons. It was incredibly huge, powerful, and fast. With the incredible reaction speeds afforded to AI, X was able to assess the moment, to truly look at the T-Rex. The sun shone off its feathers in an array of patterns. Bamboo and wood shattered under its bulk. Its eyes were a deep honey gold, gaze ferocious as it stared at Craven. X stepped forward to attempt to protect Krav. Yes. Craven roared, running forward while ripping his 2 daggers out of their sheaths. X felt the closest he could feel to shock. Craven, in a complete reverse of what any rational human being would do, ripped a spear out of the ground and rushed towards the dinosaur. Don't do anything? Let me handle it. X reached for the rifle on his back, not knowing what to do now. He projected his voice. The smartest thing to do is to have me shoot the dash. Let me have this. Then it was too late. Craven and the T-Rex met in the center of the forest, both loud roars. Craven, just before the T-Rex could get to him, stabbed the bamboo spear into the ground, using it as a pole vault to jump high above the T-Rex as the dinosaur tried to bite him half. Craven landed on the dinosaur's back with the grace of a cat. Grush, came the sound of surprise and anger. The T-Rex spun around, trying to throw Craven off. I traveled thousands of miles for this, Craven said happily. He rode the back of the dinosaur, struggling to stay standing while tens of thousands of pounds of pissed-off animal bucked underneath him. Craven took his 2 daggers and stabbed deep into the dinosaur's back. The T-Rex roared as blood sprayed into the air. The T-Rex, further enraged, dropped to the ground and rolled. Craven leapt off its back as it twisted to the ground, getting swatted by the larger hunter's body, only for Craven to take the blow and roll backward, snapping back to his feet and jumping back onto the T-Rex. This time, he landed on the dinosaur's neck, straddling it like a prehistoric cowboy. Then he raised his daggers high. Bone and steel slashed down into the eyes of the T-Rex. She screamed in pain. Craven laughed, raising his daggers again and slashing into it with vicious cruelty. She fell to the ground, blinded, trying to get him off her back. Craven stayed atop her and slashed her throat. Blood spilled across the earth, steam rolling off of it. The dinosaur twitched and shook on the ground as Craven panted atop it, eyes gleaming with mirth. X watched the scene as Craven finished killing the dinosaur. That was unnecessary. Craven, his chest, face, and arms soaked scarlet, gave X a smile. No, it was. She wanted to hunt me and I wanted to hunt her. I won. She was dash. Craven scoffed. Don't. I'm quite sure an AI would have no concept of what the thrill of a good clean kill is like. Believe me, she would have been just as ready to eat us. This is the way of the jungle, X. Craven reached down and patted the dinosaur's head. She was strong. Powerful. He took hold of one of the T-Rex's teeth and ripped it out of the jaw. It is only a shame that we have work to do. Even with scavengers on the way, quite a bit of meat will go to waste. We should have scientists come out to collect it for research. Yes. They'll be on their way. Let's go, X said, keeping his displeasure to himself. What a waste of time. Craven may have enjoyed himself, but all X had was an acute understanding that every moment wasted was a moment Mahmoud could have died. Well, tell them to leave the skin for me if possible. And don't worry yourself. Craven walked away, pocketing the fang he'd ripped out of the T-Rex's head. We'll find him. The trail is clear, he pointed at the ground. This way, X followed with some trepidation. It was becoming very clear that while they shared the same mission, their differing methods and goals were going to cause some issues. Chapter 147, Around the World. Maria Hill / Director of Bridge. Maria stood in her office, tracking through the various operations happening across the world. As of now, the mission reports she was getting were beginning to throw her just a bit. Right now, she was looking at a map of the Earth with small markings showing the teams. Steve, Sam, and Bucky were in Argentina chasing down weapons smugglers who had somehow got their hands on Chitauri technology. Seriously, they had shown up on Earth for about an hour. How had they left so many weapons behind? She tried not to look at that one too often since she couldn't play favorites. Thankfully, Sam was safe. Tony was in Rio, finishing some of the cleanup that had to be done. He'd been there for a while and ended up meeting one of his contemporaries. Tony Stark / Iron Man. Tony floated above the city of Rio, watching as a set of prefab apartment buildings were being completed for refugees to use. They were basically big blocks of pre-made apartments stacked one on top of the other, allowing for buildings to be built in mere days. In other words, perfect for rebuilding Rio. He was also having an argument. Having all these gadgets makes my suit adaptable, not glitchy, Tony snarked to the woman standing on top of the building they were watching from. Do you realize how much crazy shit we deal with? I can handle all of it. Meanwhile, you find one guy who is lightning and explosion proof and you fall apart. I do not fall apart. Galena, the Crimson Dynamo, glared up at him from inside her massive suit. I am more than adaptable. I am simply stating that you have so much junk inside your armor that you risk much more instability. Junk. Tony looked at her, the slits on his armor gently glowing. Look, I admit that the fact you can fire lightning is brilliant and we should trade tips on the ion cannon you made, but I'm willing to bet I can hack this entire city, fight off an army and do that in a temperature-controlled environment while streaming Ghostbusters right to my HUD. You Americans and your need for superfluous tech, Galena said dryly. As beautifully designed, surprisingly robust and powerful as your suit is what need. Do you have need for half the tools within it for a war machine? You use the suit for battle, must it have the ability to hack planes and play AC/DC? You have no sense of style, Tony snarked. I mean, that carborundum alloy can't be beaten for its ability to conduct electricity, but did you have to make it so damn bulky? You look like Robbie the robot with that big bulbous head there. Yes, well, the high tensile strength of your gold titanium is impressive, if it were not for how ostentatious the colors you always choose are, Galena teased. You look like a woman's purse. As the two continued to do some odd combination of complimenting and critiquing each other, the apartment was almost finished, cranes moving about. Then, a message came through to them both. This is Freight Vessel 24, off the coast of Rio. We're being attacked by, I don't know, some sort of gremlins. Tony and Galena didn't hesitate. The instant the message came through, they lifted into the air. Flying over the destroyed buildings as tanks, jeeps, and crews roamed the streets below, they soon reached the beach and began to go over open waters. Old school rockets, really? Tony teased while they lifted off. Focus, please. Galena said. Tony imagined she sounded just a bit chagrined through, as her rockets blew fire to push her through the air. Besides, they work very efficiently. We'll trade tech later, Tony promised. Just then, they reached the boat that was being attacked. A large freighter carrying dozens of shipping containers. It was one of many ships that were being used to bring food and supplies to the refugees of Rio. Right then, as they came close, they were under attack by little green men. Tony said in confusion as he came close to the ship. Indeed, the attackers were dozens of short green creatures shaped like people with long pointed ears and jagged teeth. They were jabbering at each other with abandon, almost as though they wanted to speak but just ended up screaming at each other instead. Tony took a moment to float over the boat before he raised his hands and fired a repulsor from his palm. One of the goblins was hit hard by the blast, sent flying back into a shipping container and denting it inwards. The rest looked up at Tony. One raised a gun. At least, it looked like something in the shape of a gun. It was just a big pipe strapped to a piece of wood. Like, he couldn't even see any sort of way for it to shoot at all. So when the goblin started shooting it, in a machine gun hail of bullets. Ha 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 ha. Wait, what? Tony let the bullets bounce off his armor to fly down and punch the goblin, who kept laughing even as he was tossed back. Then Tony grabbed the gun and lifted it up to look at. What the hell? It's just a piece of pipe. The other goblins also started shooting at him, despite having the equivalent of rubber bands and string for guns. Tony stared at the weapons shooting at him. Good lord, that one has a sponge for a handle. Makes sense, damn it. Galena watched, bemused, as Tony started shooting and punching the tiny laughing goblins with a sense of vengeance, deciding to keep her suspicions on where the goblins had come from to herself for now. Maria Hill / director of Bridge. Thor was speaking with some historians in Canada as part of a fundraiser. It was one of their attempts to make sure the Avengers were seen being a part of things that involved more than just punching things. However, they were also supposed to do research into the Wendigo they currently had in captivity, where it had come from, who it once was, that sort of thing. Except that, despite bringing Bruce Banner along, they had to invite Thor's friends along for an outing. Thor Odinson / God of Thunder. Hulk smash. Hulk brought his fists down on Thor, who blocked the blow with upraised arms, the ground cratering beneath the God of Thunder. Thor twisted and wrapped his arms around one of Hulk's, doing a throw that sent Hulk flying back to smash into a wall. Oh, well executed. Sif cheered. Then she took a handful of popcorn into her mouth. Hulk, try a powerbomb. Volstagg cheered. Powerbomb? Fondrel asked, surprised. It is an American wrestling move, Volstagg grinned. I tell you Fondrel, the world of Midgard has become quite fun now. Hagun raised an eyebrow before focusing once more on the spar. Thor grinned at his friends before turning back to his opponent. The Warriors 3, Sif and Bruce had decided to take a break from talking to stuffy academics to practice together. It was something Hulk had requested of Banner, a chance to continue to develop his combat skills and combine the jiu-jitsu of Bruce Banner, the strength of the Hulk and the ancient fighting styles of Asgardians made just for those of superhuman power and durability. So, they had headed out to this pit deep in a decommissioned quarry to duel in peace. Thus far, it had been quite invigorating. Hulk rolled to his feet and rushed Thor, blocking Thor's right cross and countering with an uppercut that sent Thor crashing into the stone behind him. Thor grinned. Well met. Now take this. Thor dropped down with a crushing blow. Do it again. Sif cheered. Thor and Hulk grinned at her, then went back to trading blows. Maria Hill / director of Bridge. So yeah, that was happening. Thankfully they'd gone somewhere remote, but she still had to find some way to convince them to stop turning big chunks of the landscape into something out of WWE. The agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. were almost a relief in comparison. They were doing a simple investigation. Nothing had come back from them just yet, which she took as a good thing. That group of normal people tended to get into the weirdest little missions, but last she heard, Carlson had been having a relatively boring mission. She'd hear about that later possibly, but for now she could be assured that the swamps of Florida did not have the giant swamp monster that Dial had warned her about. Then there was Jen Walters. She'd been sent out with a team to investigate a few bank robberies with some marks of superhuman aid. Nothing happening there, but she was on the trail of the robber in charge, an unidentified redhead. Jennifer Walters. Maria frowned. She'd have to be prepared for that encounter once She-Hulk came back. Maria still hadn't told anyone outside the tower about Dial's disappearance. Not Jennifer, Natasha, Cap, Tony. None of them knew about it, and all of them would have some sort of reaction to the news. Possibly a bad one. Director Hill pushed that problem aside to focus on two new reports. First, Sir Magnus the Knight was reintegrating into society. Their contact in the Vatican had sent the files on his progress. Sir Magnus of the Danes. Magnus stared at the board in front of him. The large man had changed his armor for a sweater and jeans, at least until he could upgrade. Even then, his clothes were just a bit too small, his biceps, pecs and thighs close to bursting through his clothes. As of right now, Magnus was standing in a warm plush room, reading the marker board in front of him with a fiercely determined look on his face. Sir Magnus, a tall, thin man dressed in priest's garb, came into the room. I have the files you asked for. Ah, thank you, Father Timaeus. Magnus turned to take the folders out of the priest's hand. He opened it and began reading through it, smirking just a bit. Incredible. In just a few moments, you have managed to hand me more information in a single file than the best of my own time could have compiled in years. The wonders of modern technology, the priest said pleasantly. The printer, internet, they've all made things much simpler and more complex at the same time. I must agree, Magnus scowled, his craggy face twisting. I apologize, by the way. I truly believed that man was in need of aid. There is no need to apologize. We've all had to learn about internet scams before, Timaeus pointed at the board. But then, that isn't where your expertise lies. Indeed, not. Magnus looked up at the board, where a single photo stood out. A man, his mouth soaked in blood, tossing a young woman aside. It is disheartening to know that the skills of a killer are still needed by the church. But I am a man of God. And I will bring God's vengeance and hatred upon his enemies, in this time as in the last. You are really intense, you know that. Timaeus said with a calm smile. So I've been told. Maria Hill. In the meantime, Fury was handling something for her. It felt odd, having the former director and one of the most powerful men on Earth head out to run what was essentially a simple errand. But he'd volunteered. Nicholas J. Fury. Fury stood outside a nondescript brick building leaning against a black vehicle, watching as someone exited the house. She walked down the steps from her home with an elegant stride, the walk of a woman who had all the time in the world. Nicholas, the woman looked him up and down. You have become fat in your retirement. I hope so, Agatha, Fury smirked. I hear that's something you're allowed to do as you get older. Whoever said that is a liar. The woman had her hair spread outward behind her head, was wearing a purple dress, and had a white shawl over her shoulders, a gnarled and knotted cane made of wood in her left hand. But to each his own. I assume you already have a room to my specifications. That we do. Fury leaned away from the car and turned, holding the door for her, as well as for Ebony. Behind the woman, a cat strode forth. With the regality that any cat owner could recognize, the inky black feline walked forward and hopped into the car. The woman didn't smile, but she had a pleased look in her eyes. You're a good boy, Nicholas. Thank you, Mrs. Harkness. Fury waved for her to enter, following politely in her wake. Once they were both sat in the back of the car, Ebony resting in Agatha's lap, Fury nodded to the driver, a Caucasian woman who nodded back before beginning to move the car. You know, even my mother still calls me Fury. Well, good for her, Agatha scoffed. I suppose it does add to your mystique. You're one to talk. The spymaster and the witch shared a look of mutual respect before turning back, heading to TH. Chapter 148, Hero Time. Later, we were in a new cell. No nicer or anything, but it had more room. We'd been placed in together with the guys we'd been trying to kill earlier, which made things tense as hell, even with the guards watching. My guys took the right side of the cell, while the other guys took the left. I broke the tension about a moment after by looking around at everyone. Hauser. Where'd he come from? Everyone looked confused, if still pissed at each other. Hauser. Wing-girl asked. Hearing her voice for the first time surprised the hell out of me. I tried not to show that, instead looking her in the eyes as she stood between Demi and the male Aryan. The orange T-Rex with horns. Any story about him, about where he came from? Wing-girl looked around. German guy seemed confused, as did the others. In the ice of the east, someone said outside. We all spun around. Yellow Triceratops guy was standing there, stand on the right side of him and the orange pterodactyl on the left. Oh, and the requisite group of angry-looking guards. Hauser, the Triceratops said softly. His voice was deep, almost echoing. I had no idea of his name. We have been calling him Devil. Stand began to speak. My lord dash. The Triceratops didn't make a move, but Stand cut himself off anyway. The Triceratops continued. I found him when I went to the Icelands on an exploratory expedition. He was encased in ice, completely frozen through. I thought him dead. But those eyes were alive, staring through the chill. He wanted to kill me, and I decided that a beast of such stature and interesting design was worth bringing back. The Triceratops turned and walked out, surprising the hell out of me. Stand. He knows the devil by another name. Make of that what you will. Yes, my lord, Stand said, bowing. The big yellow Triceratops continued on his way. I thought about making a BJ the dinosaur joke, but I decided against it. So you're the outsider, the orange pterosaur said. He sounded like how movies portray snake oil salesmen. Nah, that's the guy from Dishonored. I could never help my nerd side. I'm Dial. Who are you? Lord Pter, ruler of all the pterosaur lords, he said proudly. Why don't you have wings? I asked hesitantly. Behind me, I could hear Winggirl let out a small sound. I winced internally. Victor chuckled. I'm afraid that only our Lord has been given such a gift. He leaned forward to rest against the bars. Tell me, Dial. Who are you, in the world beyond? A warrior? A hunter, like myself? He smirked at me. I imagine you'd make better prey than predator. I walked across the space between us and leaned against the bars as well. You know, I have a friend I should really introduce you to. It'd be hilarious. But that aside, I'm a superhero. And a fool, Sten said, walking forward. Victor stepped aside to let him past. You should have taken my deal, outsider. Not a chance, I shrugged. So, what's next? Your punishment, Sten nodded to the guards. As he did, I brought my left hand behind my back. I prayed Grash, Demi, and the others would notice it when I flashed two symbols with my fingers. Hopefully the fact they didn't move when two guards entered the cell and grabbed me. They pulled me out with no little amount of roughness. Sten watched them pull me out until I stood before him. We eyed each other. Sten, looking up into those reptilian eyes, I don't think I'd ever personally hated anyone more. It didn't help when he grabbed me by the neck and lifted me in a smooth motion. URK. I grabbed his left arm with mine, trying to get air, panicking. The pain of his scaled fingers squeezing around my neck was followed by a talon finger stabbing into the hole in my shoulder left from the arena. Fresh blood poured out as I tried to scream. I'm not doing this to get answers from you, Sten said coldly. While I am pleased that you survived, you have still defied me. This small bit of pain, the talon sliced through flesh, digging out a chunk of me to spill more blood on the floor. It's what you deserve. Fuke I tried to say, only to choke. He held me there, choking and bleeding before tossing me aside. That first gasp of air hitting my lungs again was like a drug. I got to my knees and filled my lungs with air, gasping and panting. I knew he'd do something like this. But I still fucking wanted to kill him for it. I'll be locking you in a new prison, Sten growled. Come. The guards forced me up and dragged me along. That was fine. I was fine. Deep breaths. Take in oxygen. Focus on the goals. We walked along, Sten, the guards, and myself. Soon, we were in one of the more remote sections of the arena, a place that looked like it had been built years before the rest of it. You must have done something special, mumbled quietly to me. I've rarely seen Sten so ready to torture a man. I'm a charmer that way, I grumbled in return. We came to a locked door, which one of the guards opened. Then we entered a massive circular cavern, covered in dust. I could tell at a glance it was made as a prison for something big or very dangerous. In this case, both. Hauser was passed out in the corner still covered in darts. Sten stared at Hauser for a moment before turning to face me. I am glad you are alive. It gives you more chances to come to your senses, he smiled slowly. I'm going to lock you in with the beast. When I tried to speak, he punched me in the face. I fell to my knees, bumping my left hand into the crossbow-wielding guard next to me, my palm brushing against the pouch on the guard's hip. What the fuck, dude? I shouted in pain, my head ringing. Enough, Sten snarled. I have had enough. You will be locked in with the beast. With this, he took out a bell from his pants pocket. And be given until the beast wakes to decide if you will surrender the secrets I want. Sten lowered to the ground. If you ring it, I will save you. If you do not, well, you know the creature's name. You must know of its ferocity, its rage and hatred towards all life. Sten smirked. You're a smart boy. I'm sure you'll make the right decision. He grabbed me off the floor by the back of my neck and tossed me into the cell. Then he followed up by tossing the bell at my feet. Live or die, outsider. You have 5 minutes. And if I decide I'd rather be dino food. I yelled at him while rolling to face him. Then clearly you were a waste of my time all along, he said dismissively. Which is fine. That monster hasn't been fed since we found him. You'll make a good meal. The group left the cavern, laughing all along. Then they closed the door behind them with a loud quaking thud. Just as planned. Well, sort of as planned. I slowly rose to my feet and opened my palm. In it was the small crossbow bolt I'd lifted off the guard I'd bumped into. I grinned with blood-soaked teeth. Stand. You're gonna want to watch a few movies, one day. Never depend on the death trap to work on the hero. With that, I rose to my feet and looked at Hauser. The big guy was asleep, snoring, with the horn on his head raising and lowering as he lay on his stomach. But I doubted that would last. Okay, my plan had been simple. All of them had been. Plan A, the Omnitrix heals itself. Plan B, the Avengers show up to break me out. Plan C, open the lock to the cell, take care of the guards, get fellow prisoners out, head out of the city. Plan D, free Devil Dinosaur Hauser, break out in a torrent of Super Dino fury, probably riding his back. Like I said, all simple. The best plans had to be. You could have a complex one, sure, but be ready to toss all the Rube Goldberg machines out of the window when just throwing a rock would do the job. The instant I'd gotten wind of the giant Super Dino, my plan had changed. I didn't have powers until the Omnitrix healed, but I could borrow them from someone. Thing was, I had to depend on somehow convincing thousands of pounds of Earth Dragon that I was his friend, and somehow do it without the raw masculine charisma of Zangief. I walked over to him and leaned down to look him in the face. He was huge. Even without feathers, he was built with layer upon layer of muscles. Even lying down, he was as tall as Thor was. Where did you come from, big guy? I asked softly, patting his nose, feeling the unnaturally warm scales under my palm. Rio is a long way from here. Damn Rio. That had to be how he'd gotten to a Marvel universe. At a guess, the Rio incident had pulled every dimension, time, and realm close to the one I was now sitting in. And Capcom had been smashed into the Marvel universe more than almost any other franchise. Outside of, ironically, the DC universe. What a fucking mess Rio had caused. We still had no idea what made that happen, but I was taking that whole thing personally. I looked Hauser over, then walked back to a wall, pressing my back to the cool stone. Then I fell to sit my ass on the dirty floor, my loincloth fluttering upwards. I took a moment to adjust myself. I was still wearing the armor I'd had in the arena, with fresh blood on it, though the stab wound in my shoulder was freshly bleeding. I took a handful of the bandages that had been covering it before and roughly treated the wound. Then I sat to wait. 5 minutes. Stend had predicted it would take that long for Hauser to wake. He was up in 3. First, he began to growl as best as he could around the tight muzzle that wrapped around his jaws. His eyes fluttered. His breathing sped up and he began to move. It was really something, watching all that dragon dinosaur lift itself hesitantly off the ground. I stood up as well, slowly, continuing leaning against the wall while cradling my arm. Hauser looked around. Eyes the color of caramel gazed at his cell. Then he made a sound that seemed to get choked off by his muzzle before spinning around, anger in his eyes. He stumped the ground, the area around us shaking, the horn on the top of his head twitched upward, and he sniffed the air. Hauser, I said hesitantly. Immediately he was facing me, head low, eyes blazing. That's your name, right? I said as calmly as possible. Which wasn't much. He was just, big. Big the way everything is when you're a little kid. I remembered being, I don't know, 10. And my class went to a fire station in my town on a field trip. We'd been allowed to interact with one of the fire trucks. I remembered looking up at that big red truck and feeling so small in comparison. In this case, the fire truck was pissed off. He took a step in my direction. I'm not with those assholes, I said quickly, raising my left hand. He seemed undeterred, lowering his head to stare at me and prowl forward. They threw me in here as punishment. He roared, speeding forward. I steeled myself and waited before diving aside. Hauser hit the wall I'd been leaning against with incredible power, his horn slicing through the stone with ease. Despite that, the wall was pretty intact. They locked you away, but they don't know your true power. I shouted as I rolled and ran for it before turning to face him. But I can help you? I can get that muzzle off you. He pulled his head away from the wall and turned to look at me. This time I could see what I'd been depending on. Intelligence, resting in the surprised look on his face. Hauser the Earth Dragon, I declared. You're not just some dinosaur. You're a force of nature. But you haven't eaten in days. I'm willing to bet that the ice you were frozen in ended up weakening you too. Enough that that yellow bastard could capture you. Hauser growled. The sound could be felt in my chest, shaking my heart. His eyes blazed with rage. Yeah, I get that, I said softly, my face twisting. I get that kind of hate now. Having someone catch you at your weakest, imprison you, force you to fight. And all along, you know that if you had even half of your real power you could take them apart with a breath. I was clenching my fist. It's infuriating. Getting pushed around by someone who would usually not even be worth paying attention to, isn't it? Hauser glared at me. Then, slowly, he nodded. Then let's escape together. I tossed the crossbow bolt I'd stolen at the ground. He stepped back as it skidded across to him, then leaned forward to look at it. I want revenge, Hauser. I want to help my fellow prisoners escape, sure. But what I want to do, the words felt harsh in my throat, my eyes felt hot, and my fist was beginning to turn white, is to destroy this place. Kill the person who put me here, and show these guys just who the fuck they were messing with. How about you? You wanna light some shit on fire? Hauser's eyes lit up. Stend/slaving asshole. Stend stood outside the devil's prison, standing dozens of feet away from the main entrance. Around him stood dozens of guards. There was there as well, jabbering away as always. Stend ignored the smug bastard's speech to focus on the problem at hand. He didn't like this plan. Putting the outsider in a cell with the devil couldn't end in any way that Stend would benefit from. But Lord Styro had told him to do it and his word was law, even more than the other lords barring their true master. Stend had his suspicions as to what Styro hoped for. Ever since the Yellow Lord had found the devil, he'd been obsessed with the beast, studying the creature's battles, inquiring into its condition, drawing sketches of it, and ordering the outsider locked in with it. There was something there, Stend was sure of it. Hauser. That was what he called it. The outsider knew more than he was telling. Once again, that infuriating little slave, larger, taller, and more muscular than all but the better trained warriors he'd ever seen among humans. The way his eyes glittered with emotion and intelligence. In fact, that more than anything made Stend notice him. He was insolent, yes, was keeping the secrets of his world behind a veil of humor. But the anger behind his jokes had something more behind it. Stend had captured dozens of slaves. But never had he felt as though the people he was capturing felt superior to himself. Always, they had been aware of their place. Not the outsider. That one seemed to believe that he weighs qual. It was in his stance, his brash words, even the way he fought was cautious, but not cringing with fear. Deep inside, Stend was worried about one more thing. That bracelet around the outsider's wrist. They'd been unable to remove it, finding it was somehow melted into his wrist, joined to his skin and bone. Just another mystery. Stend was thrown from his thoughts when a loud sound came from the prison. The guards shuffled nervously when it was followed by the familiar sound of the devil smashing its head into a wall, then the outsider shouting. Ah, Peter said at his side, smirking. Pity. It looks as though your nemesis is about to be killed by another nemesis. Stand couldn't ignore that little jab, glaring at Peter. Oh, don't be coy, Peter chuckled, orange scales bouncing in the light of a torch. The sun had begun to fall, making the torches a matter of necessity. You hate that human. And he hates you. There is something between you both, something so adorable I almost want to squeal. He hissed out a pleased laugh. The way you clench your jaw when you look at him, the way he eyes you while clenching his fist. I wonder, are you pleased that he is dead now? Or disappointed you never had the chance to commit the deed yourself? Stand opened his mouth to speak before snapping it shut when he realized something. He turned from Peter to stare at the door to the devil's prison. The door, made of wood reinforced by layers of steel, had begun to smoke. What dash Stand began to say. Boom, whoosh. The door exploded in a burst of flame that turned into a jet of intense red heat flying forwards, cooking the 3 guards in front of it alive in an instant. Stand, in a burst of speed that had kept him alive in the arena long ago, dived backward and ran, Peter squawking right next to him as the guards shouted and followed. The fire followed them with predatory intent, filling the hallway, setting 2 more guards alight in a chorus of horrific screams, and heating the stones until they began to melt. Sten screamed wordlessly as he ran, the heat on his back was painful. The flame only stopped about 30 meters from the door, leaving Sten to continue running before turning to face the door. What the blazes was that? Peter gasped, apparently not noticing his pun. The outsider, Sten spat out, the thought filling him to his core. He did this. The outsider can summon fire. Peter gaped at Sten. Why didn't he do that before? Before Sten could answer, a sound came from the prison of the devil. The fires that had been blazing in front of them, cooking the bodies of the dead and melting the stones, were blown out in an instant. Sten, Peter, and the remaining guards stared at the doors. Out from the doors, walked the outsider. Dressed in the armor of the arena, his long hair fallen about his shoulders, he came to stop in front of the destroyed remains of the door. He smirked at them. Then he tossed something towards them, some sort of leather. Behind him, the head of the devil slowly came forward until it was on his right side. Sten's eyes widened when he realized something. The muzzle was gone. Sten stared at the leather object the outsider had tossed, then at the man himself. The outsider's smirk widened. Hauser's jaws opened, revealing his lethal teeth, and the sound that left them hit Sten with physical force. Screeroonk. It was insane. Loud, echoing, and haunting, a screeching noise that made the primal instincts within all life want to hide. Then, deep in the devil's throat, something flickered red. Oh shit, Peter whispered. Run. Sten shouted, spinning. Go ahead, the outsider was laughing, a gleeful insane laugh, one that echoed off the walls. Run, but I'll find you. I'll have my vengeance, in this life or the next. Then fire erupted from the devil, a great plume that tore the world in front of it apart as it passed. Sten looked back for a moment. The outsider stared at him, the red light of the devil's fire flickering across him, his brown eyes glowing in the flame. The devil roared alongside him, flame exploding from his jaw, but Sten only saw the outsider, standing there, waiting. Sten ran. Though it galled him, though it burned in his soul more than the scarlet flames coming to kill him, he ran from the outsider. Mahmoud /dial. Sten, Peter, and the guards ran for it. Hauser stopped breathing flame and panted next to me. I took in the warmth that followed Hauser's attack, letting it soak into my bones. Even with the crossbow bolt I'd pickpocket helping, it had been a job and a half to cut through Hauser's muzzle. Not just because leather is tough as hell and I only had one hand to use, but because he didn't trust me, glaring at me as I used a sharp bolt near his face to cut at the leather. Honestly, I didn't trust him either. Hauser may not have been evil, but he had no real good intentions towards me either. He was a bad guy in his first game appearance after all. Still, I'd gotten it done. A couple of cuts in the right place, a few tugs on the knots and ties, and he was loose. In truth, I think half the reason I was able to do it was that none of the people who had muzzled him had ever expected anyone to want to help Hauser. Only humanish hands could have untied him, and the big guy wasn't exactly cuddly. Then there was our prison. The doors had been covered in steel layers around wood and had been heavily dented from Hauser smashing into them over and over. But the second he was able to breathe fire without it getting stuck in his mouth and turning his tongue into charcoal, he was able to pour on the heat. Even weakened, that had been enough to get business started. Now we'd been unleashed. And it was time for revenge. I know my way out, I told Hauser. We can free the others and get out of the city, get you fed. Then we come back. Deal. Hauser growled, giving me a look. Yellow bastard will be waiting for you, I promise, I grinned. Mind breaking a wall. Hauser crawled through the door until he was in the hallway entirely. I backed away to let him pass. With a roar, he spun and rose, kicking outward. The hallway turned into rubble, opening up to the night sky. Hauser lifted his head into the air and looked up at the night sky. I did the same. Screeroonk. The sound that left him reminded me of Godzilla mixed with a lion. Another plume of fire left him, rising into the air and turning night to day for just an instant. Then he turned to look at me, and I began to worry that I'd made a mistake. He didn't need me anymore. I could see the look in his eyes, that calculating expression. He could leave now, head off on his own. That wouldn't have been so bad, but he could also kill me. Just being in the vicinity of his flame was scorching. If he tried to attack me with it, even a miss would still superheat the air around me enough to kill me. We stared at each other. I made you a promise, I said softly. I'll get you food. I'll get you revenge. But if you want to leave, that's up to you. His large eyes blinked and narrowed. Then he scoffed before lowering his head. I grinned before climbing onto his back, straddling him just behind his shoulders, my knees clenching to him tightly. All right, Hauser. Let's do this. He roared in agreement, charging forward as the alarms of the city rang about us. We went down a street straight out of a medieval city, his taloned feet crushing the cobblestones, the wind rushing past us, people screaming as they leaped aside to dodge us. Yay! I shouted joyfully, head down low as I felt the rush of escape. Grack. Hauser roared as well, his tail whipping behind us, a wide grin on his saurian features. I rode on the dinosaurs back through a city built out of time and felt good, great, even. I felt at peace. Ever since I'd come to this world, this Marvel universe, I'd felt unworthy. Given immense power out of nowhere, for no reason I could understand, I'd tried everything to make myself worthy of it. Of every good thing. The Omnitrix when I first got here, the friendships I made with people I'd admired from across dimensions all my life, the money I'd gained from robbing Hydra, my relationship with Jen. All of it was something I'd worked to be worthy of. But it had always been tarnished by a voice in the back of my head, that self-doubt that whispered it was undeserved. I was a fake hero. If I didn't have the easy power of the Omnitrix, my friends, my armor, I'd fail. But now, I'd gotten lucky a few times. But that didn't account for my survival. I'd made it through the jungle and chased off a pack of velociraptors. I'd been given the choice between an easy survival and risking my life for others at my weakest point, and chose to try and save someone. I'd been shoved into a gladiator match and survived. And now, I'd turned my enemy's death trap against them. I never had to prove anything to anyone but me, and now I had. I was more than just a guy who had the strongest weapon in existence on his wrist. I was able to fight without that tool. Hell, I was able to fight and survive even with a broken arm against superhumans. All the training I'd done, all the work, had been in an attempt to silence that voice. And now, under the stars, with tons of Earth Dragon under me as we ran together, the voice was faded. Still there, like it was for every human being that wasn't a sociopath. But no longer as insidious as it once was. The Omnitrix beeped as I thought that. I looked down at it. White shone from its lens. Then, as I watched, it switched over to green. It was still half melted and beaten, but it was glowing a bright and oh so wonderful green once again. Now, really? I mumbled. Right when I don't need you for an escape. Yeah, this thing had a sense of humor, that was for sure. I tapped the faceplate experimentally with my nose. The Omnitrix blinked green at me and I couldn't help the warm smile that lit up my face when the dial rose up and the hologram came to life. So when a giant fireball began to fall from the sky to arc down towards Hauser and I as we ran through the streets, I didn't dodge it. I didn't leap, I didn't panic. As the big ball of flame approached, I just pressed the Omnitrix against my chest. It's hero time. Chapter 149, Hero Time 2. Malia/Raptor Mom. Malia ran with her daughter in her arms through the streets of the city of Sore Lords, her legs pumping beneath her as her little girl bounced in her arms. Behind her, the devil was prowling through the streets, leaving people to run or hide. Mommy, mommy, he's coming, her baby screamed in terror, her adorable scaly features set in childish fear that made Malia's heart ache. It's okay baby, we'll be okay. Malia cried out, ignoring her fear. Close your eyes, Ami. Obediently, her daughter screwed her eyes shut. Malia looked back. The form of the devil, his 3 horns high, came after them, a familiar gladiator sitting on his back. How had this happened? They had been shopping before, having a good day. Then, without warning, someone started shouting about the great devil of the arena coming towards them. She hadn't believed it at first. Then it came running towards them, an insane human hooping and hollering on his back as the devil roared. Malia had been running since, heading in the same direction as the crowd around them. She'd instinctively headed for the nearest guard tower, which she could see in the distance. Others were running towards the same tower, with guards guiding them in. She knew that the tower was the closest one to the arena cells, but didn't see any significance to that thought. Then, a familiar screech drew her gaze to the sky. It was him. The Lord of Lords? King of the sky, cloud, and sun? It'll be okay, Ami, Malia whispered, rushing into the tower. She and the rest of the civilians watched as he spiraled down from the clouds. His skin was a dusky green, his scales stretched over a taut muscular form. His eyes were deep and wise, set into a pterodactyl's skull. His wings spread wide as he began his attack. His mouth opened wide and he breathed the night air in. When he breathed out, the holy flame came from his eminence. Malia watched in awe as he released a ball of fire the size of a large man, dropping it onto the devil and gladiator. It came in an arc, landing on top of the pair and exploding in a plume of red-hot flames. Ami cooed in her arms at the sight. The Lord of Lords dropped down to land before them. He was even more impressive up close, towering over them all, literally in most cases, metaphorically in all cases. When he spoke, it was in a deep booming voice that echoed. With the flames behind him as he spoke, he cut an intimidating figure, his shadow falling upon them all. Guards? I believe you have a job to do, the Lord said, bringing his hands behind his back to stand proudly, his wings spread behind him, a single loincloth wrapped around his waist. Yes, Lord Sauron, one of the guards shouted. Get the civilians moving? I want them safe in the tower. Most excellent choice, Commander. Lord Sauron smiled, his red eyes glowing. He noticed Malia, then Ami. Ah, young one? Are you and your mother okay? Ami nodded quickly, her eyes wide in wonder, her tail wagging happily. Why yes, Lord Sauron. Lord. Sauron barked out, before throwing his head to laugh extravagantly. My dear, you are but a child? There is no need to worry about such titles as a child. Only the joy of play and learning. Until you have come of age, I am only Sauron. Malia's heart swelled at the kindness of her lord, who walked forward to rub the top of her daughter's head. Ami giggled happily. A growling sound came from behind Lord Sauron, freezing everyone in their tracks. They stared at the fire, which was still raging. Then, before anyone could move, a green ball of some sort of goo came rolling out of the fire. Everyone stared uncomprehending, as it spun its way towards the right, heading towards the arena. As it passed over pieces of stone and debris left in the wake of Lord Sauron's fireball exploding, it gathered the pieces and became larger and larger. The guards who were in front of it had a moment to comprehend this before the now child-size ball came to a stop, and exploded in a burst of green that sent shockwaves outward, sending the guards flying about. They landed in a heap of broken arms and legs. You know, an almost minuscule voice said somewhere. This alien? In a medieval world? Kinda broken. More and more green balls were suddenly flung from the fire, rolling towards the arena. Get inside, my children, Lord Sauron growled. I must deal with this threat, and protect our world. Malia and the others were pulled into the wooden doors of the tower. The last thing she saw before the doors closed was Lord Sauron taking flight as the world around him exploded apart into fire and green. Mahmoud Shaykh/Dial. When the fire came down and I transformed for the first time in days, I had a moment where I'd felt a bit hot. Then Hazar huffed, and the heat lessened significantly. Didn't surprise me. Fire cannot kill a dragon after all. Huh. Wonder how Game of Thrones ended. While the fire blazed around us, I began to change. Well, the change was beyond light speed as always, but I could still kinda comprehend what was happening through it. First, my body began to shrink, something that surprised me. Smaller and smaller, until I was about the size of a football. My skin became a smoky yellow, then hardened into a carapace of armor. My hands became legs, and 2 more came from my midsection. My mouth went vertical instead of horizontal, and a pair of antennae replaced my hair. Ball weevil. I stared down at my front left leg in surprise. Huh. I did expect humongousaur, I said in a squeaky voice. Hazar lifted his head around to his back in confusion, eyes widening at the sight of me. Then he moved to sniff at my new form, snorting a bit. Still me, big guy. He didn't seem to know how to take that. Then again, an insect did kind of make sense in a dinosaur world, considering how big bugs were in this place. Ball weevil though, that was broken. I was a living grenade launcher in a place that had just discovered iron was a thing. If it wasn't for my new insectoid features, a wicked grin would have come to my face. Well, I had promised to carpet bomb this city. Still not gonna kill civilians, but the guys who'd been stabbing me were fair game. Okay boy, let's go blow the shit out of this place. I opened my mouth and a green ball of plasma came out, solidifying into a slimy orb. I tossed in the direction of the arena and watched as it quickly rolled out of the flames surrounding us, absorbing debris to become bigger and bigger. When it hit the guards, the ball it was like C4 going off. I could see them sent flying, the shockwave of the explosion breaking arms, ribs, legs, and spines. It was horrific. You know, I said in my minuscule voice, raising it for the peanut gallery. This alien? In a medieval world? Kinda broken. Good lord, I had severely underestimated how powerful these green balls of explosive were. I needed to dial down the boom on these things if I wanted to avoid killing these guys. Hazar growled. I opened my mouth and spat out another ball, then tossed it, before following it over and over. Over a dozen green balls launched out, rolling to become as big as 3 or 4 feet before exploding in cascades of green. Even though I was trying to limit the size of the explosions, they still tossed the guards aside. No one died, but the streets around us started to get covered in broken guard bodies. Come on, Hazar. Let's get moving. Screeink. Hazar roared in agreement. He unleashed a plume of flame outwards, turning a group of guards to charcoal. I tried to keep the thought of that from my mind, focusing on my goal instead. In front of us, something rose up, flying into the air. I stopped throwing explosives to stare at him as he lifted into the air. Sauron. An enemy of the $#. I hissed, my head suddenly feeling like it had been about to burst in half. Damn, the Omnitrix must have still been acting up. I looked back at Sauron, who had fought Spider-Man alongside Stagrone once. He'd also taken on the Avengers a couple of times. He was currently circling for another pass at us. Right, he'd once flame-breathed a Black Widow. Not Natasha, the other one. Hazar, let's move, then I hesitantly added. And can you stop killing people? I kind of want to keep that a minimum if I can. He replied to that by burning someone else alive. This person had thrown a spear at us, but I got the feeling Hazar would have done it anyway. Good talk, I grumbled. Still, it felt good to be on the attack again. No more broken arm, no more broken Omnitrix. Just me, a powerful ally, and my body filled with strength and power once more. We rushed for the arena, tossing people aside. The pair of us must have made a hell of an image, an orange dinosaur breathing flame while a giant yellow bug on his back fired exploding balls of green plasma that sent Ankylo, T-Rex, and Brontosaur lords flying about with ease. We reached the arena in record time. Okay, big guy. I hopped off of Hauser and spun to look up at him as he leaned down to look at me. You wanted food, right? There's gonna be tons if you go this way. I scratched out a quick map on the dirt with one of my claws, marking out the kitchens based on my observations of the place. Should be enough to feed you for decades. I'll meet you there. He gave me a hesitant look. I made you a promise, I said as fiercely as my adorable form could, spitting out a green ball and hopping on top of it. I intend to keep it. That yellow bastard is all yours. He still looked a little hesitant, but he nodded and spun to head the direction I'd indicated. As he did, I looked at the arena. 6 guards opened the doors that led to the prison cells my allies were in and rushed towards me. I narrowed my eyes into a smile and ran backward, the ball under me moving forward in a simple display of physics. I quickly reached my top speed, picking up dirt and debris until the tennis ball-sized plasma goo under me became as big as a car. The Sorlords in front of me skidded to halt. Oh gods, one shouted, the entire group spinning to run. Someone play the Katamari Damacy theme. I shouted in glee as the ball hit the first guard. Shloop. He was absorbed into the ball of plasma goo, spinning inside it like a hamster in its ball. For a funny moment, he stared up at me through the sea of green. I hit the next guard, then the next, before I leapt off the ball, letting the massive explosive slam into the doors as the last 3 closed them. The ball didn't explode all that hard. I'd formed it as more of a bubble than a ball anyways, more to restrain, not kill. It still tore through the doors and sent all 6 guards flying. The Sorlords didn't look like they'd broken anything, but the 3 I'd rolled around in a demented hamster ball were going to be fighting their lunch for a while. I landed in the chaos and spat out streams of plasma, wrapping each in restraining webs of the stuff. Would you look at that? I chirped once I was done. I'm multi-purpose. You're an asshole, one of the guards rumbled, before losing composure to throw up on the floor while stuck to the wall. You help enslave people, you have no moral high ground, I scoffed, before running deeper into the prison. Chapter 150, Hero Time 3. Gresh/Saurian, which is different from Sorlord. Gresh watched as the guards ran out of the room, leaving the prisoners behind. A while ago, the guards, along with Stend, had pulled out the outsider and taken him somewhere. But not before the outsider had brought his unbroken arm behind his back and signaled to them. The outsider, in the time they had known him, had been odd. When Gresh had first seen him, he'd dismissed him. With a broken arm, what good was he? Gresh had already worked on establishing his rank. As a slave, the only thing worse than simply being a slave was being the weakest one. He had known this, and thus had taken steps to ensure he would not be the one on the bottom of the pecking order. So, he had continued to do it with the outsider. For all the outsider's impressive build, his broken arm had slowed him down. He had not responded to any of Gresh's displays, only taking them. Still, something in his eyes had been defiant. Unbroken. So Gresh had kept pushing until he tried to push the outsider aside to steal his food. Then the outsider had smashed his head into the floor with a single arm and told him in no uncertain terms to stop. Gresh was not a man of deep thought and introspection, but he did understand violence. So when the outsider had offered his food afterward, he knew the gesture for what it was. Dominance. The outsider had a broken arm and yet would fight. He took food but did not need to hoard it. He was strong in the way Gresh's mother had been, the matriarch of his family, standing above their petty squabbling, but coming down with a strong blow when her intervention was needed. So Gresh had watched him, and when the outsider demanded all listen to him, he had seen all his fellow slaves follow. Even the nudiest Klinder, who hated the outsider, bowed to him. The rock woman, the strongest being in the room, even stronger than the guards, had listened to the outsider. The outsider was a tyrant of some kind. He took the people around him and forced them to become his army. And when they fought on the battlefield, he had stolen the first kill with the sort of eager greed only a tyrant would show. He was a fierce warrior, killing without mercy. Gresh had not seen the look of anguish when the outsider killed his opponents, only the blood that sprayed. Gresh had tried, one last time, to demand something from the outsider in battle. To stop stealing his kills. And what had the outsider said? Then go get some more. Inspiring? If one steals from you, then why despair? You had already gained that which was stolen. You know you are capable of obtaining it. If it is stolen, then a man of the outsider's caliber would simply gain it once more. Gain and gain, until any slight against you was a bump in the road? To be so uncaring of any other, to dominate so easily, to fight like a demon and yet impart such wisdom? And then, while he was pulled out, he had flashed those signals. Among the ones he taught them in case of their necessity, had been attack, retreat, wait, defend, flank. When he had been pulled out, he had flashed 2 signals. First, wait, the symbol, a simple hand clenched in a fist. Then, attack, the middle finger extended like the blade of a deity, followed by wait again. Wait to attack. That was what that sequence meant. Even as he was dragged away, the outsider had a plan to attack. Gresh knew the outsider now, saw his eyes as Stend had tortured him. The outsider had most likely even planned for the torture, had planned for the pain to follow, so Gresh waited. And when the first explosions began, he was gratified. You think it's him, the stone person, Demi the outsider had named her, asked Gresh. Of course it is. Gresh said to the larger being. He told us his plan. Wait, attack, wait, the new Deutschlander asked skeptically in an accented version of the common language of the savage land. I'm pretty sure that's not the same as I'm about to start blowing things up. Will he be okay? The Aryan with a single wing asked softly. He's dead, one of the gladiators they'd fought, the raptor who the outsider had stabbed, said snidely. Probably killed in style, the prick. You're a prick, Gresh said, quite proud of the incredible turnaround he had made with the insult. And the outsider is alive. After all, he helped us defeat you. It was a tie, the Anklio they had also fought said, quirking a scaled eyebrow. And honestly, it wasn't like there was anything personal. You all fought well, he gave a nod to the Aryan with the single wing, who nodded back with a sad smile on her blue face. But do you think he's alive, coming back to us, and somehow causing explosions? I know of no weapon that can do such a thing. The Anklio's calm assessment pierced through where simple stubbornness had not. For a moment, Gresh's faith faltered. Then, an explosion came from nearby. Some guards shouted. Another explosion. A scream of pain, and someone joking about babies whining. The next explosion came from the doorway, followed by a guard tossed into the room wrapped up in a ball of green goo. Everyone stared at the Sorlord guard. The T-Rex Sorlord stared back at them helplessly. I don't understand what's happening, he said in wide-eyed confusion. You got your ass kicked by cuteness, someone quipped. They all looked at the door. Then they looked down. A yellow insect stood there, balanced on a green ball. It waved at them. Sup guys? Told you I'd come back. Outsider. Gresh asked, the insane idea popping into his head. No way, that's Dash, the new Deutschlander said. Oh good, we all speak the same language, the bug said. First, German guy? You're an asshole. What? The new Deutschlander said before something registered. German guy? My name is Dietrich. Sorry, had to get that off my chest, the insect said apologetically. I'm sure you're a nice guy, man. I'll help you escape this place, don't worry. German guy opened and closed his mouth, as if unable to understand what was happening. Gresh, Demi, everyone who wants to escape and get free, the outsider said in this impossible new form. I can turn into superpower beings, but that power was gone for a bit. It's back. Now let's kick some ass. Then it kicked the ball it was standing on at the cage door. The ball exploded, shattering the lock and hinges, letting the door fall to the ground. Follow me, the outsider spun and rushed out. Gresh immediately moved to follow, but not before giving the Anklio a smug look. I told you. The Anklio gave him a befuddled look. Told him you can't take credit for this? No one in their right mind would accept bugs with exploding goo as a possibility. Gresh, clearly the wiser of the two, simply followed the outsider. Demi and the others followed quickly, not wishing to be left behind. As they left, the Aryan with one wing asked Demi, so he can just become a bug now? It is the savage land, sweetie, Demi said kindly. A chicken god is running around out there. At least he is cute, I suppose. Through the hallways, they saw evidence of the outsiders passing. Strands of green hung about the walls, guards were wrapped up in balls or attached to the walls, and doors had been torn apart. Oddly enough, the disgusting smell and debris that had once filled the place were entirely gone. Now everything smelled almost like the tea that Gresh's grandfather had enjoyed, a hint of spice and warmth to it, but still fresh, and the floors were almost sparkling. This way, the outsider said in front of them, scuttling his way through the halls on a ball of green goo. Later the outsider would inform Gresh they were highly concentrated plasma. We should be almost there. Where are we headed? Demi asked. The kitchens, the outsider squeaked. Is this the time to eat? The raptor Sorlord grumbled. It is for my partner in crime, the outsider said. Down the hall, a pair of Sorlords came running towards them, swords raised. Without missing a beat, the outsider hopped off the ball he'd been rolling and tossed it forward, the ball exploding and sending the pair flying. Down here, the outsider made another ball and sped forward atop it, somehow outpacing all of them. He led them for a few moments more before a loud sound came from down the hallway. The group came running around the corner, only for all of them to stop in shock at the sight before them. First, was the human, a man tall, well-built, with some sort of animal fur about his shoulders so that it appeared he was wearing its face as a vest. The man smiled at them, panning his eyes across the group before stopping on Gresh. For just a moment, Gresh felt as though a blade had been pressed to his throat before the man looked at the outsider and grinned just a bit. He raised the knife in his hand, then stabbed down into the Bronto he'd been holding down with a single hand, an impossible feat of strength for a human. The blade slid into the struggling Sorlord's eye, slicing deep into the brain and ending its fight. Dial, you are alive. The other man was even stranger. Made entirely of metal, it towered over them all, its body built with a very stout strength. The man was holding a pair of Anklios by their throats, the two Sorlords trying to stab him, only for their blades to bounce off his metal skin without a scratch. Mahmoud. The metal man said softly, tossing the Anklios aside to step forward. Craven, the outsider said with glee. Where the hell did you guys come from? Shiny, Demi blurted out, staring at the metal man, with avid interest. I came the instant you were pronounced missing, said. Are you well? Weirdly, I think I made a psychological breakthrough, the outsider said. But that doesn't matter now. I want to share all the fuzzy feeling man, but we have business. Understood, sir, kneeled to the outsider, further proving to Gresh that the outsider was clearly the leader of whatever nation he came from. What are your orders? Take the arena, the outsider's eyes narrowed. This place is the slavers' center of power. We make it ours, we force them to come on our turf. Lock it down, make them show up. A sound plan, Craven said with a smile. But they will know this place well. They will, the outsider looked around. But they don't know my allies, my powers, or how fucking pissed I am. Call in the boys, X. I made 2 promises. One to a dragon, and one to myself. Gresh reveled in the look of anger in those insectoid eyes. I intend to keep them both.